Gigi Foster, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Jack. It's a great pleasure.
Oh man, I've been looking forward to this for a long time. Honestly, I've been counting down the days, as I was telling you. 2 days to a podcast, 1 day to a podcast.
Very sweet. Look, I love doing these things. Like I said, I really like being able to talk openly about what has happened during this time, because a lot of people I think they're curious about it, but there's not many forums we have where we can really get into the detail and what it was like to be a person on the front lines thinking something different during that time. So yeah, it's a great opportunity.
And even like the forums that we do have, like how much can we trust them?
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
And you never know. Like, I mean, I'm kind of trusting that you're not going to, use
I'm
this to
setting
take
you
me
up.
down.
No,
Like, you could be a spy,
This is a setup. This is a setup.
Absolutely legit. You could be. I don't know. You
Yeah,
got to
no.
operate in faith. I have to be like, well, probably the likely thing is he's probably, it's still only 95%, man. You got 5% to play with.
Who knows? Who knows? You don't know me. You don't know me.
That's right. That's it.
Look, you sent me an article a couple of weeks ago that was talking about you did a talk at UNSW with TEDx.
Yeah.
Okay. And my understanding is you did this talk and it all went well. The people from TEDx supported it at the time that were there. TEDx's people loved it. Yeah, this is great, blah, blah, blah. This talk got sent back to TEDx HQ in the US. And for some reason, a forum that is, this is meant to be like open discussion. We can voice our feelings. It went against their guidelines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How does that happen? Give me a rundown on that whole situation.
Well, I mean, I can tell you from the very get-go. So what happened is I think these are basically franchises of TEDx that operate in different universities and maybe other places around the world. And we've got one at UNSW, mainly made of students, if not only made of students. And, I teach at UNSW, right? So I'm teaching hundreds of kids per year, right? And they see me in the classroom, and some people love me and some people hate me. That's how it goes, right? But the ones who love me really love me, and they want to, work for me or whatever. And this particular couple of kids who had been in one of my classes was like, would you do a TEDx talk? And I was like, sure. And if I'm going to do it, this is what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
And I basically,
so you warned them beforehand.
Oh yeah. I said, look, the topic is going to be something like manipulation. How do you get manipulated by altruism, by your own love for other human beings? How do you get manipulated into doing things that are bad?
Sorry, just with the double point Scrabble words, what is altruism?
Altruism. If other regarding feelings of love, caring, compassion, warmth towards another person, that typically drives us to do things that you wouldn't think would be in our own self-interest immediately. So when you hug your children, generally speaking, most people who are not psychopaths do that because they know that it's good for the children and they love the children. They want the children to do well. So they hug them. And even if they hated hugging them, they'd still do it. They're not doing it in a kind of instrumental fashion to try to get something for themselves. Like if I hug this kid now, then when I'm 75, he'll take care of me or something. Like that's the sort of calculating strategic sort of thing that, our model of man in economics, because I'm an economist, would often sort of say, well, that's the baseline, that's the default. Mm-hmm. But we know that people love each other. Like, I mean, I've studied love for years, right? And it's a thing, and it really motivates people strongly. And that's one of the reasons why we can be manipulated by it. And I wanted to write about this and talk about this in the TEDx talk, because I just saw it all around me during COVID. Everything that was being pushed with a message about love in some way, whether it was love for your grandmothers, love for your country, love for the health of the whole society.
That's how they was pushing this on us. Like, This is all
for the greater good, right? For the good of all the people you love. And sometimes, for your good as well. But it was almost, the social shaming was much stronger in relation to that kind of altruistic motivation. Like, oh, I was called a granny killer, right? Which shows you everything about that, right?
That's a granny killer.
Right there. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I have a whole jar of names that I was called. I mean, it's not pretty. It's not pretty. Right? But I also have a whole email box full of, amazingly beautiful, sweet messages that I got during that time. Probably 80% of the emails that I got or messages that I got from this society in Australia were incredibly positive. Yeah. And probably 20% were either kind of on the fence or negative. And a lot of the negative ones were just like one-liners, like, go back to your stupid Yankee home, bitch. But anyway, so this TED Talk thing. So I said, look, this is what I would say. And these sweet, naive students, 20-year-olds, whatever, they're not au fait with the way these power plays work, right? And they just don't understand. And this is one of the reasons I thought my talk was good, I think, because I learned something from the talk, right? Mm-hmm. Which is this is what happens. And guess what? That's what TEDx is doing to you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And potentially, right? Potentially. And I didn't want to say that initially. I wanted to give it a go and see whether they would actually be open to airing this, right? But as it turned out, they weren't. But I went ahead and, I did the rehearsals, and, they helped me with making sure the slides were, exactly up to standard, because you can't advertise your own stuff. So you can't, for example, put an Amazon site on one of your slides, right? You can't have like, oh, buy my book here. So I just had to have like the book cover, right? But nothing about Amazon. And so that sort of thing, right? So we did go through some edits to make sure that I was not in my slides or in my speech overtly countering the content guidelines, right?
Yeah.
And anything that TEDx had said. And I looked at that too, and I thought, okay, well, this is exactly the kind of big idea, maybe dangerous idea, whatever, that TEDx was founded to platform. So if they're serious about their mission, they should take it. So it was basically a test of TEDx, and they failed. Because what happened is I gave the talk, everybody clapped. Yep, it was, fine. All the students were very, laudatory. Sorry, they praised me a lot.
Yeah.
And, it was lovely. And they were like, oh, it's so great to work with you. All this, which is lovely, right? I mean, they're so sweet and adorable kids. And really, I think they really did learn something. Also, a lot of them were Asian, and I was talking about the Cultural Revolution in my talk. So some of them really learned something about that.
Yeah, because what you were talking about, you were backing up with like historical comparisons and facts.
Yeah.
But a lot of you compared it to Nazi Germany or something.
The rise of the Third Reich and Cultural Revolution. Because in both cases, people were being manipulated by their love for something. In the case of the Nazi era, it was love for your fatherland, the German fatherland, right, which had been crushed in the Versailles Treaty and all that. And a lot of economic devastation during the 20s and 30s. And so the German people were hungry for something that would restore the fatherland they loved to health. So they were sold on that basis to this kind of ideology, which ended up asking them to dehumanize people. And that's what happened, right? And so the same thing also happened in the Cultural Revolution, where people were essentially led to believe that everything associated with old things, whether it was old people, old ideas, old customs, all that was bad, and that they needed, because of their love for China, to accelerate the proletarian revolution, and for the greater greatness of their country, they needed to embrace new things. So they basically just killed old people and, ransacked old temples and did all these things. And, the Chinese culture is kind of an ancestor worship sort of culture, right? It has that aspect of it. It's very, people respect their elders. And so that really ran against that kind of ancient traditional wisdom, that ancient traditional teaching that the Chinese people had. So it was a huge sacrifice for them to make, but it was, because they thought, they were sold on the idea that making that sacrifice was needed to help their country. Right? And it ended up actually just causing more devastation. So the same thing happened during COVID, where we had people being sold on things like lockdowns and the masking and the vaccines and all that stuff.
Bunch of bullshit.
For a respiratory virus that was basically, if you were looking at the data in March 2020, which I was not dangerous to people who are healthy under 50, really, right? I mean, maybe
I still haven't caught it. I've never caught it. I've never caught it.
I don't even know. I mean, you can't. No test is perfect, right?
I mean, I also very rarely did tests.
Right. Well, there you go.
But there were times where I felt sick, and people were like, "You got to get tested. You got to get tested." Fuck that.
Who cares? I mean, it doesn't really matter, right? Does it actually matter? Like, honestly, in my view, does it even matter what you have? If you're sick, that's, the suffering and death, that's what I care about, right? I don't care whether we call it, SARS-CoV-2 or, dibbity gibbet. I don't care what it is, right? Whatever the thing is, and you want to figure out what to do to help people. And that was the other aspect of the COVID era, of course, I'm sure we'll get into, that I covered in my talk as well, which was how the alternative ideas were suppressed. That was the case in the Cultural Revolution. That was the case in the rise of the Third Reich. And that was the case in COVID. If you had a different opinion, if you thought, for example, that maybe, I don't know, having a lot of vitamin D was a good thing to protect your immune system, and that maybe when you got early COVID, you should try ivermectin, because there were some whole face studies happening even then without big pharma funding. Guess why, right? No prizes for guessing why. But there were some good doctors experimenting on the front lines with repurposed medicines like ivermectin. They were getting good results. And, if I'd had a really seriously ill relative with COVID, I'd be combing the internet looking for that sort of stuff. And that's what you try if you care about health. So if you really care about health, you do something completely different than what we were told we had to do if you cared about health, right? So it was this completely, backwards reasoning. And the same thing happened in the two historical examples too, right? So censorship of alternative views was a big part of how the manipulation worked.
Yeah, see, I feel like even right now, like if you talk against, like if you go against the norm and say like, ah, COVID, it was a bit of this or whatever,
Mm.
people look at you like you're crazy. And even more
Yeah.
so back then when it
Oh
was
yeah.
actually happening, like
Oh yeah.
it's a bit easier now to
It
kind of
is.
talk against it. But that's only because people are starting to look around and go, wait, why couldn't I leave my house?
Yeah.
What's
No, I
going on?
know. They're starting to wake up. That's
Yeah,
right.
100%. And
Yeah.
like, I feel like I got stitched up. I think I got manipulated. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of people are starting to realize that as well because, like, I was told I'm not allowed to work unless I get this vaccine.
Yeah.
And I did get the vaccine and I regret that shit. I
Yeah.
regret that shit hard,
Yeah. Of
man. Cause,
course.
like,
Yeah.
just look at how everything's just back to normal.
I
And, like,
know.
man, COVID was a crazy time.
Yeah.
Like, we
No.
were being told you can't leave your house, you can't go to the shops, you can't catch it, you can't get on public transport, you can't go see your mates, you can't get on a plane, you can't go to work, you can't do this, you can't do that. 2 years later, 3 years later, however many years later, everything's back to normal.
And not only is everything back to normal, but COVID is endemic. You know,
Mm.
people are getting COVID, have had COVID, and most people have had COVID. You probably have had it. You probably just
I
like
probably have, yeah.
asymptomatic,
No,
whatever,
honestly, I
right?
probably
Like
have.
if you haven't been testing, I've probably had it, whatever.
The
But
jab saved me. The
oh.
jab saved me. I'll probably go about the jab saved
Look,
me.
legitimately, I do think that there's probably a couple months of protection from some things from the jab, but like honestly, again, is it worth it for somebody like
Mm,
an economist? The way that we're trained is to think about possible government actions towards achieving the greater good, right?
yeah.
And we think, okay, here are different things you could do as a government. You could subsidize this, you could underwrite that, you could tax at this level, you could whatever. And you could lock down, you could have a lot of money spent on vaccines, whatever you do. But whatever you do, you want to evaluate that policy choice based on the costs of it and the benefits of it in relation to the objective. What is
Yeah.
the objective? In my mind, what I've always been taught, and the reason that I was drawn into economics in the first place is it's maximum human thriving, happiness, welfare, good stuff, things that
Mm,
you would want for your child,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's what motivates me every time that I go, to talk about any kind of policy or try to think about any option that a government might have is this a good thing or is it not a good
Yeah.
thing
See, this
on
is
net?
this is what I was gonna say to you because I think since COVID lockdown, government has lost a lot of governments around the world have lost the trust of the people.
I
I think
agree.
a lot of people all of a sudden the government will tell us something and now a lot more people are like, can I trust that?
Yeah. And honestly, I think in the case of Australia, at least, that's probably a good first step.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have, and I've really, this is an area that I really was naive about before COVID. I did not understand how deep and how wide and how catastrophically sort of crippling the political apathy is in this country. Right, we just have a country of people, particularly the younger people, sadly.
Oh,
But
100.
but
Oh,
like most people, they just don't. They don't. It's not that they don't care about their lives and like making a good sort of living and hoping that their children do better than them and all that. Of course, we all care about that. But this notion that you are a steward of your society and it's part of your responsibility as a citizen to make sure that the people whom you've elected, who are in charge of the machinery of state, of all the resources that you've basically given to the government sector, are doing a good job, right?
mm,
That responsibility that lands on your shoulders. I'm sorry, but who else is going to do that, right? It's
mm.
not going to be the people in power because we know power corrupts. So they're not going to look after each other. I mean, they will look after each other, right? But they're not going to check each other to
Power's
the
very
extent that's
corrupt.
necessary,
I
right?
think I think in our government there's a lot of virtue signaling as well.
Oh, don't even get me started on
Oh,
that.
tell me,
Oh
tell
my
me,
gosh,
because
don't
I
even get
say
me
it and
started
I'm
on
like,
that.
I don't think you mean what you are telling me.
Totally.
You're just telling me some bullshit.
And
Just
the
so
thing is, well, the interesting thing though is it's a psychological thing, right? And in fact, I'm up here in the Blue Mountains, and it's convenient for me to
yes.
come and do this because I'm visiting a friend of ours who is a psychologist. Well, sorry, I'm sorry. She's a former registered psychologist. She got deregistered because she had the audacity to go out on a public podcast and say that the lockdowns of schools, like the closures of schools, were hurting children. And she's a child psychologist, and she said, "I've got a professional duty to notify the public, notify somebody when children are being harmed.
Yeah.
They're being harmed right now
So
in front of my
maybe
face."
maybe
Right?
you've got like a bit of backbone about you, or like a bit more balls than other people. But is there any part of you that's scared to get on a forum like this and say what you're saying?
Not at all. because
Because there
no.
could be ramifications, you know what I mean?
Well, fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know. Some people have different opinions. We don't have a registering body in economics. So I've got a PhD in economics. So this is my situation, right? I've got a PhD from the US, from the University of Maryland. Been working in Australia for almost 22 years or something like that. I'm a professor at UNSW in the School of Economics. I have a national teaching award. I was named Young Economist of the Year in 2019 by the Economic Society of Australia. So I've gotten some big awards in the sort of profession, right? And I've not been canceled somehow by my university or other bodies of authority during this time, regardless of what I've been saying. And I've been saying an awful lot. Let me tell you, I have been saying a lot, particularly about the lockdowns.
Someone's got it.
Well, the thing is, I felt like I've got the platform to do it. Universities are supposed to be about allowing free debate, discussion, and free thought about whatever. And again, my goal is human thriving. I mean, sorry, but that's unarguable. And I will not be backing down from that. I'm not going to go along with something that I think is bad for people. I'm sorry.
Gigi Foster for Prime Minister. You heard it here first. That's what I want. You sold me.
Oh man, no, I would be such a bad politician. I can't remember people's names. Jack, I know your name, Jack, yes. Right? But I'm so bad with names, and I don't remember who put what bill when, and who wrote some addendum, and whose wife said what about the dog, and all the stuff you need to remember to be a good politician. To do the deals. I mean, A, I find it gross, and B, I can't remember the details. I'm just not important. It doesn't stick to my head. What sticks in my head is like ideas, right?
Did you follow the last election?
Yeah,
the election just gone.
Yeah. I mean, I do follow it because I need to be able to comment, on the air about stuff that's happening, right? So I follow it well enough, but it's just I hold my nose when it comes to the real politicking stuff. So if I imagine going into politics and being a politician, no, thank you very much. Right? An advisor, sure.
Yeah.
An advisor, it would be fine position because I can still say what I want, and I also can be separated from that power position because I know I've seen what power does to people. Right. And so people have asked me, what would you do if you were queen? Just, how would you change things? I mean, I could, go off on, 36 things that I would change. Right. But the first thing would be make sure I'm not queen after 6 months.
Yeah.
Seriously. Absolutely. 100%.
Why is that?
Because I don't want to be in power.
That's when they come for you?
No, it's not about them. It's about me.
Yeah.
I would be afraid that I would be corrupted just like so many other people in history have been corrupted with too much power. Like I know my heart. And at the moment, in this moment, I would definitely say, oh, of course I would always do the right thing. That's what they all say.
Honestly,
right?
I 100% understand what you're saying. I've thought about something similar kind of thing. Like I reckon I would be scared that I would change after having too much of an influence.
That's it.
Like I want to stay the way I am. And I always say, oh, if I was this, if I was that, I know how I am. I reckon people would love my views.
Yeah.
But,
Exactly.
But I reckon if I got to a certain point, fuck, would I stay like that forever?
That's it. And if you're a student of history and psychology, human nature is such that we just find power an aphrodisiac, right? Almost regardless of who we are. So there is a bit of a selection process. Like it is true that people who seek out positions of power probably are even more affected by it than others, right? But there's a reason why the Lord of the Rings story is so powerful, right? The one ring to rule them all, right? And he goes crazy, right? And he becomes this shrunken, horrible creature because that's the effect that power has on your soul, basically, right? That's what we're being told. And in that story. And so I take that seriously, right? And so I'm not going to live my life in a way that I've got too much power. So I do try to keep myself fresh.
Power is bad for some people, a lot of people, most people probably.
I think so. And if you do find yourself in a position of power, for those of you out there who are listening, who are in positions of power, you're thinking, oh my gosh.
There's not many people listening.
Well, let's hope. Let's
no, let's not hope. What are you even wishing bad on my show for? Come on.
Well, the powerful have power, right? They have influence. So if they actually are convinced by their message, then maybe they might do something different. But the way to handle it is you try to surround yourself with people who will tell you no. Right, who will keep you grounded. They'll say, it's not true that everything that comes out of your mouth is golden, and ideally, you manage to frequent places that you can't get to when you're really powerful in disguise. The whole idea of a disguised king going to the pub. That's what I would be.
And I've heard, I don't know these stories too well. I couldn't put names on anything or give good examples, but I've heard, for example, in Australians politics, right? In Australia's politics, they become prime minister. They have this great lifestyle. They live it lavishly. They're on a great, what a cash per year, whatever. Yeah. They got this, they got that. And then it becomes, if you say something that goes against what we want you to say, these luxuries get taken away.
Yeah.
And that's why these people in power are scared to say what they truly want to say.
Totally. It's a machine. It's a machine. Right? It's a
Yeah.
machine. And if you want to know about this, so you're very right about that. But a lot of Australians don't see their country in that way. They don't see the entrenched corruption and the networks of favoritism that keep things running at the top, right? But that's a real thing. And so people want to read about that. There's a colleague of mine, Cameron Murray, who has written this book called Rigged, Rigged, which is basically, it's an updated version of a first version that they self-published, basically, because I knew that no publisher would go towards it. But then it did really well. So Rigged, I think, is I don't know, it's some publishing houses put it out. But the first version was called Game of Mates, How Favors Bleed the Nation. And I love that title because it just captures it all. And it's basically chapter by chapter corruption in Australia. So financial industry, superannuation, et cetera, higher education, property markets, all these different areas where that kind of favor exchange, you basically buy in. And once you're in, it's really hard to get out. It's like the mafia kind of thing, but, toned down a little bit. Like there's not as many, people having horse heads in their beds and, being put into bridges in the concrete or whatever. But, it's that kind of direction, right? And in a way, it's hard to fight against it because I can imagine these young people, they want to get ahead, and mateship and favor exchange is kind of natural, like if you were going to tell me after this show, hey, I've got a mate who's a student at UNSW and he'd really fancy a chat about his future career options or whatever, would you be willing to meet with him? I'd probably say sure. But would I say that to some random person who I've never met? Probably, actually, because it's me. But a lot of it's hard to reach people for favors or for good resources without having a network. And so in a way, that's just the way business goes, right?
Yep.
But if you take it to an extreme and you actually calculate how much of Australia's wealth is being essentially funneled into the pockets of a very small elite, right?
Yeah.
It is staggering. So that's what this guy Cameron Murray's done. He's actually done that calculation, and it's really staggering. And so then what does that tell you? Where do you go with that information? As an economist, what you say is, okay, I would like to modify our institutions in such a way that it becomes more difficult to do that kind of favor exchange. So one way, for example, is to have rotation of staff. Because those networks, they develop over time, right? Relationships between people. Okay, have somebody fly in from Germany to do our financial system review. Don't have it done by, ASIC or whatever, Opera. Or
if we have people from the other side of the world, but helping us in our politics, do you think that's for the best of the Australian people?
It's not,
could
it's not
we
with
be
the politics.
concerned about their?
Yeah. It's not with the politics, right? It's just with if we had a financial, like if we had a royal commission, let's say, right? Like a royal. In fact, I was calling for this like I don't know 5-10 years ago. That we were doing this, analysis of the financial industry, and people were bemoaning how corrupt it is and how much profit it is. And I said, well, just get some overseas people to come in and do an independent analysis. You're looking for independence in the kind of examination of various kinds of systems or sectors or whatever, where you think that this kind of thing is going on, and have those people then say, right, yep, this is not working, and so this needs to be changed, and these people need to be fined or whatever, and then have them just go back to what they were doing, right? So secondment, basically, right? So it's not taking politicians or people who would own or have people coming in and owning parts of Australia. It's nothing about that. It's just getting advice, expertise, basically, in a particular area like financial regulation, or it could be anything else. It could be health regulation. It could be education, right? It could be lots of things. I think we should be doing a lot more of that kind of exchange and kind of stirring up the stagnant pools that presently control a lot of what happens in this country, right? Including things like curricula. Don't even get me started on that, right? and how we get medicines onto the PBS, the pharmaceutical benefits scheme, right? And the Therapeutic Goods Administration. I mean, there's just so many lines of networks along which favors get exchanged, and then what people are going for is not the good of the people. It's not that, right? It is something completely different. It's what is good for them in that moment. And then they'll justify it saying, well, of course it's for the good of the people because look, it's a vaccine. Isn't every vaccine great? Or whatever, right? It's some story they'll tell themselves and they'll tell others, and people will go along with that. So I would not underestimate the amount of that rationalization that happens. A lot of people in these networks, they do not think of themselves as people who are freeloading on the wealth of the country.
And I mean, our government funding seems to be a bit of a shit show. So maybe having someone come in from overseas who doesn't have Australian agendas
exactly
is actually a good idea.
Yep, exactly.
Now that you say it.
Briefly, not to be here permanently, right? It's the
idea. Just come in, sort something out, or just give us your opinion.
Give us an advice, exactly.
From an outside point of view.
Yep, exactly.
I think that is actually a good idea because when you think about it, the amount of funding that goes into certain certain things in Australia right now, it's coming from a very, I don't even know how to describe it. Like we've got this Australian agenda,
Mm-hmm.
this Australian opinion that might not actually be good for
Mm.
Australia because
Yeah.
certain people within Australia is very divided.
Yeah.
So if you got one person who's from one side, kind of,
Yep. No,
you know what
totally.
I mean?
Well, and also if you think about the way, I mean, we're told that our country, like many other countries in the West, operates because of this beautiful invention called democracy,
Mm-hmm.
where the people give their voice to the polity, and the polity then enact their will through legislation and judicial things and the executive branch. But what really happens is that, yeah, we all vote every few years, right? So that's the voice of the people part. But apart from those every few years, most people in Australia just kind of kick back, have their barbecues, do
Oh,
their podcast, do whatever, right?
100%.
They're not thinking about politics. They're not caring about politics. They're not invested. Who's invested? Lobby groups, right? Lobby groups and special interests who have a lot to lose or gain from particular bits of legislation or particular acts of the government. And so, of course, those are the bodies, the organizations that will see it in their interest to put money into training up lobbyists, hiring the lobbyists, and having them go to Canberra and
Yeah.
then lobby hard, right? And so that's just what happens. So you end up having a disproportionate representation of these big organizations that would benefit or lose from the various actions government could take. And
Yeah.
those people do not represent the Australian people
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
whole, right?
It's kind of like we call ourselves a democracy, but what is, yeah,
It,
I mean, democracy is meant to be, my vote is as important as your vote. All our opinions, we're all people of the country.
yep.
But I don't think what is happening in the country is actually for the good of the people of the country.
Right. But that's, again, it's because our voting process is just a very, very weak,
We've
diluted
got a weird
method.
voting.
Well, it is weird. The
It's pretty
preferential voting
weird.
system is weird. I actually don't mind the preferential voting system and the compulsory voting. I think that's not too bad compared to some cases. But we also have first past the post. We could talk a while about political, mechanisms. But the main point is that the mechanism of voting, however you do it, in any Western country today, really, maybe with a couple of exceptions, they're doing a lot of referenda, is very dilute. It's
Mhm.
just not like, you're not really able with your vote to express your opinions about
Yeah.
all of the different 25 different policies that you might really think are important, right? Whether you're
Yep.
talking about, climate or health or education, whatever you care about, right? And so you have to do this through these politicians, and the politicians don't even really make their platforms known, and they're actually
Yeah.
tethered to these parties anyway, these huge parties which have the huge machine,
Yeah,
right?
see, these politicians are very easily corrupted by
Yep.
their own party
By
as
their
well.
own machine.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
Yep.
Like Peter
Yep.
Dutton came in,
Yep.
and I reckon he got super. Like I think at first he was doing all right.
hmm
It seemed to me that by the time the election actually took place, it was basically Labor.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so interesting to see how these things play
Yeah.
out. The person versus the machine.
Yeah.
And you see it again and again. You see it in Labor, you see it in Liberal. I mean, I honestly, I think both of the big parties are just kind of beyond hope. They're just too much of a machine. They're not enough. They're not even really thinking about the structural problems Australia has.
Yeah.
Where do you get thought about that? In the tiny little parties,
Yeah.
these tiny little weenie parties, which are trying to make a go of it, and generally they don't even, maybe they get one senator, if we're lucky or
Yeah.
something. But these are people who can actually think independently. They actually have some policy positions. Their websites will have policies on them. And they're trying in the face of this kind of not very good system. So I think we actually need reform to the mechanisms of eliciting voice from
Yeah.
the people to the machinery of state. So that's the kind of area where I've blogged with my co-authors on the Great COVID Panic, my first COVID book, about how we can do that. And there's a number of different ideas, and it would require a reset mentally of, what is my role in this society? I'm not just, an engineer or a doctor or a swimming instructor or whatever you are, and a parent and a father or whatever. I am also a steward of my society's wealth and health.
Yeah.
Partially. I mean,
Yeah.
one amongst, however many million, right? But
Yeah.
still important, right?
Yeah,
And so I have a
100%.
responsibility to help, to make sure that we don't get basically abused by those in power. Because
Yeah.
if you don't look after it, who is going to look after it? Just there's not some kind of, special priesthood class who's going to be batting for the Australian people when all of the people in power are basically corrupted or just, controlled by machines of various sorts, the political machine, party machine, corporate machines, whatever. And they're not going to come up with some new change. And, oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. All of our policies were bad. No, right? So who's going to do it? It's got to be the people.
See, this is why Like, and this guy is so controversial, but Donald Trump,
Yep.
like, I don't know what your views are on someone like Trump, but this is why I love Donald Trump. Because what I see going on in America is someone coming into politics and being like, fuck all that noise.
Yep.
Fuck all that shit. This is
Yep.
actually what's happening.
Yep.
And
No,
you know what I mean? I love
totally,
that. I
totally.
love it.
I think the U.S. I mean, there's a lot to say about this topic. Obviously, the U.S. so badly needed a total redirection. Right?
Yep.
It was just going so badly
And
south.
look at the shit that he has
And look at what's
copped.
happened. Oh my gosh, right?
Ugh.
And of course, that's exactly what you expect
Yep.
because of the special interests we just talked about, right? All of
Mhm.
those lobbyists, all those special groups that are, oh no, you're going to take away my stream of income. Oh no, right? And the doging, right? All that
Ugh.
doge stuff. Oh my gosh, right? And I think even though you can absolutely argue that Trump is a narcissist and, not very good with words sometimes and a bit too much of a deal
He
maker,
babbles
whatever.
some shit
Right,
sometimes.
sure.
He
Okay,
does,
all
but-
these things are true. But I mean, we don't hold all politicians to that
Yeah,
standard.
we don't. We
I mean,
don't. That's the problem. We
right?
don't hold every politician to that standard.
No.
And you know what? Part of me thinks that when he does make the when he does
Yep,
babble his
just
shit
riff.
sometimes,
Yeah.
which he does,
Yeah.
it kind of makes you go, oh, he's just like us.
Yeah, it's a humanizing
It's a
kind
human.
of thing.
It
Yeah,
really humanizes them in a way,
totally.
but not to the machine.
I know,
Not
exactly.
to the
Well,
machine.
because it's dangerous.
Yep.
It's dangerous, right? So
Mm.
the machine will try every tactic, every
Yeah.
tactic. I mean, people throughout history, again, just do not forget how corrupting and seductive power is. People will lie, cheat, kill their own family, right? They will just do anything to keep onto that power. And
Yep.
the money flows as well, I think, that have been set up by so many years in the US and many other places in the West towards particular special interests that are favored, whether it's the suppliers of the US military who are getting, millions of dollars every year for, cutlery and, flak
Yeah.
jackets and whatever, right? To the pharmaceutical industry, to even the, the textbook industries, right? There's just so many industries that have got their snouts in the trough, right? And whenever the trough, there's a threat that maybe the trough could be taken away or not as much food could be poured into it, or there might be another trough, or, it's dangerous. It's basically competition, and
Yep.
it's looking like, oh, that could threaten my livelihood. And so, of course, there's a closing of ranks and a decision of, okay, how are we going to, and also to different bodies will be doing this. How can we take them down?
Yeah.
How can we silence them? It's the same thing that happened to Jay Bhattacharya during COVID, right? And Martin Kulldorff when the Great Barrington Declaration came out, which your listeners may know about. That was October
Yeah.
of 2020.
They probably know more than I do. I don't really know much.
Okay.
About them.
Well, anyway, this is a trio of top epidemiologists and sort of health scientists who came out and said, look, we shouldn't be locking down all these healthy populations, right?
It's probably a reason I haven't heard of these people, actually, now that you're telling me what they stood for.
It's possible. I mean, Jay
Honestly.
Bhattacharya is now the head of the NIH, right,
Okay.
in the US. So he was one of
Yep.
Trump's picks for that, right? And he's sort of working with RFK and these guys. But Jay Bhattacharya actually came and toured Australia. He is it was very sweet a couple of years ago. And anyway, they came out and they didn't think they were going to get canceled. But we've seen in some of the Freedom of Information Act materials now that in fact what happened is there was, after that, their first little statement came out, there was a kind of collection of people who stood to lose a lot from that viewpoint being more widely disseminated and believed in, who said, look, we gotta take these people down, call them fringe, call them whatever, figure out a way to invalidate their message. And then, that ended up happening. So this was when the US was essentially kind of censoring people through their links to social media, right? The US government was pressuring social media companies. That's part of what happened.
See, I hate seeing freedom of speech being taken away from people.
Yep.
And I'm seeing in the UK, it's really bad. People are getting arrested for posts on social media.
Yeah.
And look, I get there's limits to freedom of speech. Like there's some things you can't say. You can't run into a theater and scream fire.
Yeah,
Like, you know what I mean?
exactly.
I get it.
Yeah.
But it's like what we're saying is a problem. What we're saying is destroying our society.
I totally agree. This is one of the reasons that I co-founded Australians for Science and Freedom in 2023. So one of the outputs of the COVID era was, of course, a growth in various organizations trying to push back against the stuff we saw. And ours is, I think, it's the only cross-disciplinary free think tank. Free think, right? Free thought. Think what you like. We have a blog site. People can post stuff, and we have events, and we have all these things. And basically, the pillars are scientific method, scientific approach to scientific problems, and freedom. So, medical autonomy, freedom of speech, academic freedom, all that stuff, because those are fundamental pillars of human progress, actually. It's not even just about, the personal liberties, for that person, him or herself. It's literally, where does progress come from? It comes from innovation. Where does innovation come from? It comes from thinking something different.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you can't think something different and say it,
Yeah.
then your society is going to stagnate.
But we live in a world where if you think something different, you're labeled crazy.
Yeah.
So,
but you gotta push back against it.
Yeah,
I mean,
100%.
like I am not a granny killer. I'll tell you right now, Jack. In fact, my mother, my grandmother's actually died before I was, a full adult. But my mother had dementia for 4 years, and I'm the only child. I had to fly over to Florida, a couple weeks every few months for a few years, and it was a nightmare. And I kept her, I had to protect her from an abusive husband. And I mean, the whole thing, not my father, the whole thing was a complete mess, right? So far from being a granny killer, I actually really sacrificed a lot for my own mother because I saw her suffering and I wanted her to have the best possible, experience in her most vulnerable moments. When, you have dementia, nobody is going to look after you who doesn't, who's not like purchased or loves you, right? And so I had to look after her, and actually,
it's
had a lot of health consequences myself from that. But then to be called a granny killer, it's like, okay, I
crazy.
knew it was ridiculous.
It's crazy
right?
that you're labeled a granny killer.
Yeah.
After speaking about something that you believe in, and it's like, even when, like, back to the UNSW kind of thing, I saw an interview that you did on it was an ABC Q&A. Was it ABC?
Yeah, ABC Q&A.
ABC Q&A. I saw on that panel, right? You're sitting with a couple of people, maybe like 6 people. It seemed to me they were all on the other side.
Yeah, pretty much.
It seemed like every single one there was not keen to agree with you.
Yeah, so you probably saw one of the episodes from 2020. So
it was 2020.
Yeah, so it was on April and August, I think, of 2020. And yeah, I mean, the thing is, it was hard to find people who weren't going along with the narrative in some way in those months, right?
Yeah. See, when you were on that show, and I don't know, I watched this episode a while back when we first started talking, but I saw something happen in that where you said something, and then one of the responses you got was, "Oh, so you advocate for people dying."
I know. I know. It's amazing, right? But that's the narrowness, the shallowness of thought that comes from being in a crowd.
Yeah.
Right? When you are caught up in a crowd and crowd thinking, you just don't really require the kind of firm evidence-based and logical connections and stuff that normally you would require to accept something, right? People will just be like, okay, what does the crowd think today? I will now barrack for that. And here are my reasons why I'm not going, not going to accept other arguments, blah, 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 blah.
That's why there's so much virtue signaling, because all these politicians, they just want to keep the crowd happy.
That's it.
They're not actually standing for, like, they're supposed to be a leader. We're supposed to hear what they say and be like, oh, okay, this guy knows, I trust him. But there's none of that.
Well, what there is wrapping in the flag over and over again, right? What's good for Australia,
Wrapping
what's
in
good
the
for the
flag.
battlers. So you take a
Okay.
not very well thought through policy, which is probably just favoring your friends, right? And you wrap it in whatever pretty packaging will sell
This is good
on that
for
day.
Australia.
Good for Australia. Good for women, right?
Okay.
I understand. The gender wars, right? Good for
Oh,
women.
the gender wars. Come on, Gigi.
Right? I mean, there's so many different flags that now will work basically to sell, nonsense to people, and they don't look inside the packaging. They just swallow it right down. It's like you're eating the candy with the wrapping still on, man. If you take the wrapping off, you'd realize that this tastes like dirt, right? This is not actually furthering the interests of the group that it says on the package, right? It doesn't help women, for example, to think that half the human race is out to rape them and abuse them and be nasty towards them and hurt their children, right? That is not helpful with women, right? And it's not helpful for men, certainly either, right? So, and it's not helpful for society, because you break that bond between men and women, the ability to collaborate between the genders. That's like the foundation of civilization. You can't just, that's a serious threat when you start, sending out a message that basically women have to be afraid of men and men are these toxic sex predators. That's really, really deeply dangerous to the roots of the society.
Yeah, see,
right?
Toxic masculinity is that's what they're pushing. That's the narrative, right?
So bad.
But like, how bad? Like, I don't know.
Well, again, okay, take that a little further. Like, so what you're saying that this person on the Q&A was saying that, I'm advocating for people to die. So she's trying. It was a woman, I remember, who said that. she's trying to basically impute a motivation that I have. When you talk about toxic masculinity, right, or these other kind of nasty behaviors supposedly that men have or are going to do, you're basically that mindset has implicitly an imputed motivation of men, which is hurt women, right? Hurt women or get ahead no matter the consequences, right?
Yeah.
Now, in my experience, most men love women. In my experience, right? Most men, because first of all, there's an evolutionary reason for that, right? A pretty strong one, right?
Yeah.
And secondly, like they're humans, right? And men are not, they're not animals, right? They're humans just like women are. Women love men, men love women, generally speaking. So anybody who sort of stops with, okay, men must be all bad because they're not thinking about that man, any man, as a human being, and using their knowledge about what they've seen in their life of how people behave. They're not really thinking about their actual motivation.
There's
so
women
there's
out here saying, "I'd rather be in a forest with a grizzly bear than a man."
I saw that. Unbelievable. It's so insulting. It's
Mate,
I mean, it's insulting to women too. Like who's the idea that that's even I don't know. There's so much to say about that. I just find it so ridiculous, and I think you should make fun of it, right? Like honestly, we need more people
we need
making fun of this nonsense, right? It is absolute nonsense, and it doesn't mean
How many women out there have tried being face to face with a grizzly bear?
Exactly.
Who out there? Who out there, like, let's make this happen. Let's get it. If you want to go face to face with a grizzly bear, let's see how it goes.
That's so ridiculous.
Can we outrun a grizzly bear?
Yeah.
No, we cannot. It's stupid.
Well, the other thing is that if you say these things, right, if you say what I think would have been considered sane 30 years ago, things like, sure, sometimes there's violence against men or against women, and it's bad, and we should all condemn
definitely
it,
happens.
obviously, right?
And toxic masculinity, like it does exist.
Sometimes there are guys who are toxic.
Yeah,
sure,
100%.
there are women who are toxic too. Wake up, right?
Yeah.
So, like, I'm sorry, but those things are sane, right? If you were to say that now, but you'd stop short of saying like basically most men are dangerous, and on average you can trust a grizzly bear more than a man with your life, right? If you actually were going to stop short of that, you would then risk being put into a box that has all sorts of nasty labels on it. Things like misogynist, things like wanting, they're thinking that women are somehow less capable, thinking that men are innately more superior in some way, right? And the thing is, you can't even admit to real things like, okay, that women on average are physically not as strong as men. Sorry, that's the case. That's human world. Sorry, we're living in this world. Like you can go to Mars, maybe you'll find something different. But here, on average, right? And so it's almost like you get pulled back into these kind of regressive labels, right? If you just say things that would be considered sane 30 years ago.
And this is all part of the, if you stand up against the norm, you are labeled a misogynist.
You are.
You are labeled a racist. You are labeled this. You are labeled that.
Yep.
It's like, it's scary to stand up against the norm.
I know.
Like it's actually scary.
No, I mean, I think that's the reason why most people went along during COVID.
Yeah.
They were absolutely petrified of being socially disapproved of, socially rejected.
Bring it on.
Right?
Bring it on. Apparently there's another COVID strain. I mean, I've heard this. I've heard this many times. But I'm sitting there going, "Fuck, bring it on, bring it on!" Oh, fucking mate, I ain't copping no more vaccine. I tell you what. And I swear, if I reckon, like I say, governments have lost trust in the people.
Yeah.
I reckon we're probably at a point where it's like governments would be scared to have another lockdown because surely, if there's any type of sense, they'd know that I hope a lot of people would stand up against it.
Look, I hope you're right, Jack. I honestly, if they could get the same level of fear going that was happening in March 2020, that was the thing that was the trigger, right? Because if you look back, I've done, of course, a lot of work on this, right? And there's some evidence that in early March, Australian governments and governments around the world were saying sensible stuff about COVID. Like, this is kind of a nasty flu if you're older and maybe
it went
comorbid,
downhill
blah, blah, blah,
quickly, didn't it?
Yeah.
The
and
narrative,
what happened was, the narrative switched in mid-March because, and this is my theory, is what happened is the ICL modeling came out. Remember that Neil Ferguson modeling of like, millions and millions of people around the world are going to die. And we started seeing the video coverage from China, from Milan, from New York, all these, body bags, and oh my gosh, the morgues are overflowing, and everybody just got totally freaked out.
Yeah.
And then after the politicians noticed that their populations were freaking out, the politicians realized we have got to be seen to do something about this. right?
Yeah, so they felt pressured to.
They felt pressured to
Yeah.
act. And it doesn't mean that they felt pressured to actually achieve health. Right?
They just wanted
Right?
to seem like they were doing
Exactly.
the right thing.
The
They were like, fuck, we
appearance-
got to say something.
The appearance is what matters. And that's
Yeah.
if you've ever watched Yes Prime Minister, Yes Minister, wonderful series from the UK. Oh my gosh, you'd love it.
I haven't
It's
seen
basically a
that, yeah.
documentary on how government works, right? And essentially it's the politician's syllogism that came out during, as one of the episodes, I think, is essentially the government says, we have to do something. Here's something. Let's do that. That's
okay.
literally the only logic, right?
Yep,
It has
yep.
doesn't have to relate at all to the thing that purportedly is scaring the people. And in this case, of course, it was COVID, right? So basically the government had to think of something that was a big policy move that seemed somehow proportionate to the quantum of fear that was being felt by the population so that they would keep their seats, their political seats.
And the thing is, like, there's always something that's scaring the people. They've got like unlimited
fear potential.
They got 100%. They got that much content potential right now. Like,
Yeah.
Ray, like, I don't know. Like, there's climate change.
Yeah, yeah.
And look,
yeah.
let me tell you something, Gigi. Let me tell you something. I'm not like climate change is a hoax.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm looking around. I'm going, I don't know if I think there's a bit of bullshit going on here.
You're very right, Jack. CO2 is plant food.
I know. Thank you. This is what I was telling my missus this yesterday.
Absolutely.
I was like, babe, listen, and she doesn't really understand what I'm telling her, but I'm like,
Yeah.
babe, plants eat CO2, then they
Yep.
give us oxygen.
That's it.
But
And they grow more. They grow more when they have more CO2.
Yeah.
So that's why we have the greening of the earth that's presently happening. I just put a blog on Brownstone Institute's website, so brownstone.org, about basically the things that are good that are happening in this world, because we need a little bit of, sunshine in our lives, right? And the things that the West has delivered that are really positive for human thriving. And so we talk about the things that are going well, and one of them is greening. The earth is greening.
Yeah.
The deserts are greening, right? And why is this happening? Because more CO2 in the air.
And they're also saying that exactly, because all these things that, like, fossil fuels, cars, this and that, factories,
it's releasing the carbon that was in wherever.
But
right,
the
under
argument
the ground.
is, but here's the thing, because climate change activists, or whatever we want to call them, they don't exactly deny that.
Yeah.
They just say that, but there's too much CO2. And it's like a greenhouse effect, like.
Yeah, but okay, so if
the earth is getting too warm.
Yeah, sure. So if you look, I mean, I don't know. I've seen a lot of, I think very sensible analysis of this whole problem. And in my view, yes, people are subject to exactly the same patterns that we've been talking about in the climate area as in many other ones. They stop too short of really thinking everything through, right?
Yep.
So and what is the loved thing? What is the altruism? The other regard, the thing that you're looking at that you love, that you want to protect, is Mother Earth.
The planet.
And everybody loves Mother Earth.
Yes.
Can I just say, I love Mother Earth.
I
Do you
love
love Mother
it.
Earth?
I love it. I love this place.
Exactly. This is a wonderful place. We
Yes,
all
it's
love
beautiful.
it. We want to protect it, right?
Yep.
It's not like there's some, bunch of people around there who are like, let's kill the planet.
So
right?
it's a very similar mindset to the whole COVID thing.
Exactly.
Because it's like, oh, you care about your loved ones. Oh, you care about the planet.
That's it.
You know what I mean?
It's exactly the
Oh,
same, right?
shit.
So it's love for something outside yourself, usually, right? And you are urged to sacrifice for it. And if you love something, you'll sacrifice. This is what I said in my TEDx talk, right? And then if you don't sacrifice, you're accused of not loving that thing.
Yeah.
So, either you don't love women, you don't love the earth, you don't love your grandparents, you don't love your kids, you don't love whatever, right?
Mhm.
And you are so vulnerable to this, Jack, because we all love each other so much.
Yeah.
We love our gods, our countries, our children, our parents, our loved ones, our everybody. We are full of love. We love it. We live and breathe love every day.
They're
And it's one of the
weaponizing what
wonderful
we love
things.
against us.
It's exactly what's happening,
Yep.
right? And the only antidote to that is to remind yourself, manipulation happens, and this is what I advise everybody in my TEDx talk. Every time you're asked to make a sacrifice, ask yourself, will that sacrifice really help the thing that I love?
Yeah.
Will it really help? Will it really help women to basically label men in toto, in aggregate, on average, toxic sex predators? Is that a good thing? Is it really going to help the earth, which, by the way, is greening and greening and greening, to have less CO2 and, also, by the way, less human thriving? Because when you move away from clean and, dense and reasonably cheap energy, right? And by clean, I mean not like dung, right? So like the dung is bad, right? You want to move up from that. But if you want to move to, something like, I don't know, wind farms, for example, you're killing birds, you're doing a lot of other stuff, right? And
Wind farms kill birds?
Oh yeah.
Really?
And solar panels all across, the areas of land
this
that
is
would
what
otherwise
this is
have
what I was going to say
animals,
to you,
right?
because I feel like maybe in extreme cases, they're chopping down forests
To build wind farms.
to build fucking wind farms.
Or solar panel farms.
Solar panel,
Yep, I know,
big
exactly.
It's big solar
Exactly.
grids.
So what is
It's
Earth?
like, why are we killing the?
So what is good for Earth? Again,
Yeah.
and people are just sucked into this because they just think, oh well, I want what's good for Earth, and green energy is just linked to Earth. I mean, just the word green makes it seem like it's linked to Earth's protection. It's friggin' not, man. It's not. Like, there is a place for some of this stuff. Like, I've got a family island in Canada where we use solar panels. It's off grid. It's awesome. You know, the solar panels work great, and there's no problem with using solar. Like, you know, a lot of applications
I got solar
it works.
panels on my house.
Yeah, exactly. And there's some applications, I think, for electric vehicles that are great as well, right? That makes sense. But you got to use your brain and think, okay, when does it actually make sense? Does it really make sense to go to net zero by 2035 or whatever? Like, what? What are we talking about? We're talking about if you really wanted to make that happen, you would have, like, who are you going to kill? Because it's really going to hold people back in their own progress, in their development, in their quality of life. And I tell you one thing we know about human protection of the earth: it happens more the richer the person is. So if you want to protect the earth, you want to get people out of poverty. That's what you want to do. Number one job, right? And how do you get people out of poverty? Give them clean, dense fuel, and ideally not really bad, like, you know, dung, like really dirty, because that's going to kill the kids with the wood fired stoves and stuff, right? So you do want to, you know, if possible, get to something like natural gas. You know, some coal burns pretty clean, right? And, you know, nuclear. Why not? Why are we not investigating the options with nuclear? A lot of other countries are. You know, France has been on nuclear power for, you know, decades. Like, it's possible to do it. And so there's just this kind of blockage that you get to with people who have signed up to these narratives based on a slogan, based on a virtue that's written on the package, and they haven't really looked inside the package. And I tell you what, Jack, they're scared to do it because thinking is hard. And thinking is risky because you might discover that you've been had. And that is not a good feeling.
It's not good.
It's not a good feeling for people who want to feel good about themselves, right?
So they talk about, oh, we need to protect the planet. We need to protect the planet. And then they chop down all our forests.
Exactly.
Like, that should probably be illegal.
Yeah. You want to protect the forest, right?
Yeah, we want to be protected. Like, they're giving us oxygen. Have people done the simple maths here?
I know. I know. Exactly.
The oxygen's there. Okay, we need the forest.
And also, you know, we talk about, you know, people who are going to die because of the boiling planet, you know, the extra temperature. Well, more people die of cold than of hot. Right? It's actually, if you look at like how many people are actually being affected in a lethal way by climate, the type of climate that's really bad for people is super cold, not the super hot. The super hot stuff, you know, there are some people who die from that, but it's many more who die from the cold. So a few more degrees, even if that happened, right? It's not going to be the, you know, the like more people are for sure going to die.
The thing is, the climate is always changing.
Of course. And if you look in history, the best we know, it's changed a lot, right? It was since, you know, like even before people were around, like it was really going around a lot, right? And like, you know, the whole shallow ocean Earth and all these different kind of, you know, different types of Earth that we've had have had completely different flora and fauna, and they've found different balances.
We adapt. The Earth
exactly.
adapts.
The Earth adapts. We adapt. This is what life is. Life is adaptation.
Life will find a way.
Life will find a way. Thank
That's
you,
what
Jurassic
they say.
Park.
Yes.
Exactly, and it does, right?
It does find a way.
Absolutely, it finds a way. So all this, and it's so crippling, you know, this kind of fear, and I think it's particularly bad for the kids, you know, because the kids get exposed to this stuff in school. They get exposed. I remember my daughter coming home. Thank goodness she's, you know, not been sucked into this stuff, but she's 22 now. I think it might have been maybe 10 years ago. And she came home and she was obviously, very anxious. And I was like, you know, what's going on? And she said, you know, I really hope that the earth doesn't, you know, like boil by the time I get to be an adult. You know? It's like, wow. I mean, man, that's child abuse. That is child abuse.
Yeah, I'm scared what they're teaching us in schools right now.
Yep,
like,
it's very
look,
scary.
Let me bring this back to vaccines, okay? Because there was something I want to talk to you about while we're here. So I'm about to become a father.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm going to be having a little girl in September. I cannot wait.
Oh, wow.
I'm so excited.
My daughter was born the 11th of September.
Oh, that's when my baby's due.
No way.
I swear to God.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
And, of course, the 11th of September.
9/11 babies. All right, let's go. All right, look. Here's the thing, right? So I'm very skeptical about what I'm going to be told my little girl has to have
the shots
jabbed in her.
Yeah.
Okay. And you get a bit conspiracy theorist with this. Well, look, we're both labeled crazy. Okay, we can just admit that. But look, I'm genuinely I'm a bit worried about a whole bunch of things. From vaccines, the type of society my little girl's going to be growing up in, what she's going to be told at school. I'm hearing right now there's some schools where they've got kitty litters.
Yeah, I know.
Kitty
for
litters.
The kids who want to be treated like cats, right?
Bro, put a fucking chain on them.
I know.
Send them outside. What is going on here? And like, I'm actually scared to send my kid to school right now. It seems like homeschooling is a better option.
Yep,
Like,
I totally
honestly,
understand that. And in
honestly,
fact,
and
so my daughter, the one who was born 11th of September,
yep,
is just got engaged to be married.
yep,
She's going to be married in Europe and in a castle, which is the campus of a new university that we're starting. And there's a huge bathtub in one of the bathrooms. And I said, hey, Sonny, honey, you could have your baby in the bathtub. And we've talked about, okay, well, what are you going to do in terms of both the vaccines and the schooling and everything? And they're very keen to have kids, so I think it's going to happen soon.
yep,
And honestly, what I think is that, I mean, from a just first principles scientific standpoint, I suspect there's probably a couple vaccines that on balance make sense.
yep,
But I think probably the most of them in aggregate, just because of all of the extra stuff that's in them, right?
yeah,
The adjuvants or whatever they call them, the aluminum and all that, aluminium as you guys say it. All that stuff relative to the benefit that you actually get. I
yep,
think that the harms are probably more. And again, if I go back to that cost benefit analysis, that's what economists do, right? On balance, is it a good idea or not? On net, is the quantum of benefits higher than the quantum of costs or risks in the case of a medical intervention? And I think probably for most, vaccines, you have to ask that question now, because we've
and this
seen,
is all I want.
the indemnity stuff and all of the
Yeah,
reasons why all sorts of regulations will have come through that weren't properly tested. And you have the benefit that you've got RFK in the US who has been working on this stuff for years and years, and I think you're going to see a lot more evidence coming down the track about whether or not certain things are actually worthwhile. And I do
yeah.
think probably some of them are, right?
So,
But
so this is all I want
yep,
for a lot of people, is just to start asking
yep,
questions.
exactly.
Okay, like, I saw something the other day. I was reading something that said 50 years ago, 1 in every 2,000 people had autism.
Yeah,
Today, 1 in 36.
exactly.
And I know back then people were probably more diagnosed when it was severe autism. But like, all I'm saying is, when are we going to start asking questions?
Yep. No, it's
Because
absolutely right.
that's how I'm feeling. Like,
Yep.
and like, if there's already, the midwives and whatnot, they're asking my missus and myself, like, is she going to be vaccinated in this and that
Yeah.
and that? And then
Yeah.
you're saying no, and they look at us like we're crazy.
Yeah, of course.
Like,
I
they
know.
actually do.
I know, because they too have been just sold this line and they haven't really done any research themselves.
Yeah.
If you ask people, have you done your own research about whether or not this vaccine is on balance good for your child? That's the scientific method, man. I'm sorry. That's the
Yeah.
scientific method. That's what you should be doing.
That's all I
right?
care about. Is this
And
going to be good for my child?
Is it going to be good for your child? Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's all you should be caring about. That's what is appropriate in this situation. And we have trusted our health experts for a long time to do that research for us.
Yeah, but
But it turns out that the health research is basically corrupted.
Yeah,
right?
100%. They're
So-
making money off of,
Yeah.
like, there's Johnson and Johnson's.
Mm,
Okay, now I know RFK is a bit of a cooker himself, but he said that Johnson and Johnson's is making cancer-causing sunscreen and then they're treating the cancer that they
Yeah.
they caused. I
Look-
don't know the truth in any of these, but like, when you
Well,
read shit like that,
yep,
I'm just like,
yep.
bro.
So I'll give you an example from COVID that's like that. So
Yep.
Merck, which was a big producer of ivermectin back
Yep.
in the beginning of COVID, actively suppressed any information about how ivermectin might be useful in COVID. Why? Because it was working on a vaccine, right? So wanted to be able to get more money from a profitable new product that
Yep.
was, still patented or whatever, rather than some repurposed drug that was off patent they couldn't get much money from.
Yep.
So that's the natural, sort of economic logic behind it. And that will be the case for so many different things. I mean, honestly, when I go out in the sun, I use zinc and coconut oil as a
Yeah,
mix.
see, I don't even wear sunscreen, honestly. Like, look,
I'll
well-
turn into a lobster if I don't wear anything, but if I wear just a
Oh,
little
I'm
bit
the
of zinc
same.
and,
I'm the same. I'll go red.
Yeah.
But it's like, I believe that the sun can be bad. Obviously, I've been sunburnt before. I got real
Sure.
bad sunburn
Yeah,
before.
me too.
Like,
As a
100%.
kid, yeah.
Start peeling and shit,
Sure,
like,
yeah.
100%. And I think, look, I'm not that knowledgeable on it, but I'm sure too much sun will eventually cause skin cancer. But the sun's also good for you.
Sun's also good, and you need some. You need vitamin
some of
D,
that,
right?
yeah.
And the best way to get it is to be in the sun for
100%.
15, 20 minutes a day.
Yeah.
So I run, and that's one of the things. I try to like not have too many things on my legs and arms, because that's you get sunlight that way. They have to supplement with vitamin D or whatever. And I think that that high vitamin D stuff, I mean, that could be pushed out so much more for the COVID narrative. And of course it wasn't, again, because it's an easy way to treat something or to prevent something that could otherwise be very, very profitable.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I mean, on your little baby, I would be erring against vaccines at the moment, generally speaking,
Yes.
but There might be a couple that would be useful, and I would just say, look, you got to do your own research.
Yeah.
Like rubella, maybe. I mean, there's a couple ones. We have a health scientist in Academia Libermentis, this new university I talked about. You'll put links in the description, I'm sure, of this, so people can look it up. We have a health scientist who's really deep into studying this stuff, and she's worked in pharma, directly inside the belly of pharma, and she's worked for governments that are approving drugs or not approving drugs for whole countries. She's worked for consulting firms, so she's seen the whole gamut. And she's not like an RFK type who's been working on vaccines for 3 decades or whatever, but she's very sensible. She's a scientist, right?
Yep.
So, and she's now kind of had her eyes open a bit by the whole COVID thing. And now she's kind of, been looking at, okay, which vaccines? And of course, there's like 72. I mean, there's a huge number to look at, right? And figure out, okay, on balance, in collection with everything else as well, remembering that every little bit you're getting this, kind of accumulation of stuff that gets injected.
Yeah, see, there's so many vaccines nowadays.
Yeah.
Like I'm also a stepfather already. Okay.
Wow.
Now my partner has only had something like 6 or something. But she told me the other week, like her eldest daughter has got like 20 something vaccines.
Because it came in sort of more in the, I don't know, 80s, 90s.
Yeah. And I'm just like, that's fucked up.
It's a lot.
That's fucked
and
up.
if you look at like, what
and no one's researching this shit. No one's researching.
No, of course not, because there's no money in it.
Yeah,
there's no money in it. But if you look at human longevity, right? Again, what you care about, what I care about is, human lives, quality of lives, length of lives, number of lives, right?
100%.
So if you look at what actually in human history started to tick that stuff up, it was something that happened in the middle of the 1800s. And what that was, my best guess, and with my co-authors as well, is that it was basically a discovery of sanitation, like the value of clean water, clean air, clean food, good quality inputs essentially, and not having huge loads of viruses, bacteria, whatever else. So there was a UK law, like a sanitation law, 1848, which essentially public health law, which essentially started to clean stuff up in the cities. And that's when you started seeing human longevity tick up. Right. For the babies, of course, the infant mortality went down, and also people were just living longer, and even when they got to adulthood.
So after this discovery had kind of been made, then
it sort of disseminated out, and people started, as sewers were, erected in various different cities, you start to see the death rate come down, and of course there's
people
infectious
started
agents.
living longer.
Exactly.
People started getting sick less
because their immune systems are stronger, because they're not constantly having to fight off so much bacterial load, so much viral load, whatever. And of course that matters, right? The bacteria and the virus, they do contribute to disease, I think. I mean, that's my best guess, the germ theory of disease. But it's the terrain theory is the other theory, which is basically, if you are strong, if the terrain on which the bugs, are attacking is strong, you'll be more likely to repel the bugs. So both of those things are operating at the same time, right? So you want to have a strong system as much as possible, but you also want to have not too much load of the bacterial organisms. So the sanitation systems that were put in place essentially focused on reducing the load of these various kind of pathogens, and also giving good water, good food, nutritious food to people to build up their immune system. Yeah. And so then, and there were a few other things that happened. Like there was, a lot of milk that came out in the early 1900s, which seems to have, really seriously brought down, some infectious diseases amongst children, and other things that happened. But there was way before the vaccine era, right? Yeah. The vaccine era comes, and I mean,
when did vaccines first become?
Well, I mean, middle of the 1900s is when you started seeing some things, like for polio, for example, and, and smallpox as well. And then, more and more and more in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. I mean, varicella vaccine, I think, came out in the 90s. That was, my kids had that, right? That was the anti-chickenpox vaccine. And one of them was protected and the other one wasn't, actually, funnily enough. So in childhood later on, I got shingles, which is the same bug, right? And my daughter still got chickenpox from me.
Yeah, right.
Funnily enough, but my son didn't. So, anyway, but so if you look at the actual timelines, again, taking a scientific approach, right? It's not taking a cuckoo approach, not taking some kind of crazy ideological approach. I just want to know, dude, like, are these things actually on balance a good idea for human health, right? That's all I want to know.
That's all I want to know.
And you need to be able to, you just need to look at the data and do your best guess. And sometimes it's really hard because you don't have the counterfactual, which is like, what longevity would we have seen if we hadn't had the vaccines, right? So you have to try to make an educated guess about what that would have been like. You have to maybe go to some countries that didn't have as much, or a staggered entry of vaccines.
It's not even hard to study. I mean, like it's too hard to study good data. That's the thing, because I don't even know if the data that I'm reading is
It's hard for the person on the
is
street. Like if
true.
you haven't had scientific training, it is bloody difficult to
Yeah.
make your way through a scientific article and pick the mistakes. In fact, I've got a cousin in the US who's a nurse, and we have crossed swords over COVID. Let's just say that. And, early on when the vaccines came out, she sent a mail to the whole family saying the mRNA vaccines are completely safe. And I was like, I don't
Says
think so.
who?
I've seen the animal studies. This doesn't look good. Right.
Yeah.
And so she was like, oh, let me send you some articles. So she sent me a couple articles. They were just basically gobbledygook. I mean, I could see there were so many mistakes in these articles and so many ways in which, sleights of hand, basically, that the authors were using to try to, delude people into thinking that, yeah, this was all good, hunky dory.
Yeah.
And I just said, I just don't buy this. And she would just be like, well, this is peer-reviewed literature. It's peer-reviewed literature. Therefore, it is absolutely right. And I was like, sorry, do you realize the corruption in science today?
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't, right? And of course, and she's a smart girl. Like, she's a smart lady. She's, a nurse. She's got a master's degree in public health or something, right? She's not a dumbo. So for her to be, misled, I mean, everybody else on the street, good luck.
That's
Right?
that's the problem. Like the people that are telling us false information,
Yeah.
they're often such seemingly trusted people.
Exactly.
Like,
I
you know what I mean?
I know.
So
I know, but there are also, I mean, honestly, if you look at the ranks of the what I would call, I guess, resistance or restoration movement or whatever, restoration of sanity movement, there are a lot of people who are well credentialed, who are smart, who are, esteemed people. They were esteemed before COVID. John Ioannidis, for example, in Stanford. Jay Bhattacharya at Stanford. He's an MD and a PhD in economics. Martin Kulldorff at Harvard, right? Sunetra Gupta at Oxford, right? There are people all over who are actually very esteemed and renowned who did not go along, at least with all of the stuff that we were, told to do. And yet people sort of just discounted them. So part of what has to happen is kind of a recognition. Okay, there's been this suppression of genuinely learned voices, genuinely, learned, elder, experienced people. Peter McCulloch, right, who know what they're doing. He's probably the best published cardiologist, I don't know, in the U.S., maybe I don't know, certainly in his state and his area. And yet he just basically doesn't, get the mainstream very much. I mean, he's been to Congress a few times, but he just works. I mean, that guy works like a dog. He's sleeping like 4 hours a night, and he's just committed to his cause, which has got to get, reasonable, sane truth out to people, right? And just open their eyes to what's happening, and not sell them on an ideology, and not try to pit them against, big pharma for the sake of that. We need pharmaceutical companies to keep making drugs for us. Like, sure, Western medicine has given us a few things. Like, I would like to have antibiotics if I get septic. Thank you very much, right? Is though you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, but neither do you just blind yourself to the realities of power.
yeah.
And the realities of super, super, super profitable, drugs and medicines and systems of favor exchange, because that's just stupid. If you blind yourself to that, you can't see what's happening, and you will be taken down the garden path, and your health will be taken from you, and your wealth, and your joy. And I'm not willing for that to happen. So you have to stand up against that stuff.
If these medicinal companies really cared about people not getting sick, they'd be broke.
Indeed.
Like, how are they going to
Indeed.
make their money?
Indeed. This is a big problem. This is actually a huge part of the problem, because you got to somehow figure out, what are you going to do with all these people who've been working in the pharmaceutical companies? What are you going to do with them? If you structure a new society where you've got, a new system of health, basically, right? And you basically say, look, I don't want 80% of what I'm being sold right at the moment, right? Take 80% of what the TGA approves or is on the PBS and throw it in the ocean, right? I don't want that. I want aspirin. I want basic antibiotics. I want ivermectin, right? I want a few basic things. And basically the rest of it is just Me Too nonsense. And you can probably address a lot of it with just nutrition and sleep and good health functioning communities,
Yeah.
Then you're going to have all these people who are out of a job, right? And they know it, and that's why they don't like this idea, right?
100%.
So what are you going to do with them? So then you have to think, okay, creatively, you need to give them a job. Well, they could work maybe, retrain in nutritional medicine, right? Or in kind of, maybe go overseas and study what some particular culture has in their medicine, like what's the Aboriginal culture tell you about how to treat, a virus or whatever, right? And somehow do something in health. But you've got to allow for the grandfathering out of these people, because otherwise you just got a whole bunch of unemployment and a whole bunch of people who are absolutely broken psychologically, by the way, if they realize what's been going on. And that's going to be another huge social problem, right?
Yeah.
So you have to take care of people, including those people who have been captured by this stuff and even have been making their money out of it, right? They are still people. They are still people. And if you're serious about a peaceful transition into a better society, you've got to have a grandfathering plan. So that's, again, something I'm working on, because that, we're going to need it at some point if we don't want to have bloodshed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seriously.
Oh,
I mean,
man.
have you taken the temperature in Europe recently? I mean, it's it's hot and up over there. Like I would not be surprised that for us to see more violence in the West, a lot more violence before this stuff starts getting better. And I don't want that, right? Violence is awful. I don't want war. That's directly destructive of the thing I'm going for, right? Which more lives, better quality lives, more longevity. So how do you get people to work from love instead of hate? It's really hard.
There's money to make in war as well.
I know. That's another one of the problems. The military-industrial complex, and Trump is up against that. Let me tell you, right?
I love Trump.
He is. I know. But he's up against it. Like he's up against this because I think he's a serious pacifist. That's one thing about Trump that I think everybody, it's hard to make an argument that he's not, right? He's tried to bring peace to Pakistan and India. He's trying at the moment in Ukraine. He's trying in Gaza. I mean, you can critique his methods, but he's genuinely going for peace. Why? Because he's a businessman.
Yeah.
Right? You can't trade with somebody who's dead.
Yeah.
Right? So you gotta have people trading with each other so they don't want to kill each other.
Yeah.
And he recognizes that. That's a basic rule of economics too.
I saw I'm pretty sure he landed a peace deal in Gaza, a ceasefire deal. But I don't know if he actually did, because I saw that the headline wrote Trump reaches peace deal, waiting for Israel to respond. Some shit. I'm like,
exactly.
So I don't really know.
It's a deep mess over there, but I do think his motivations are for peace. So I think that's a positive thing, and hopefully that kind of influence can spread around, and people can start working more from their love for each other and their recognition that the way we go forward in life is by collaborating, by trading, by thinking new things, innovating, and sharing stuff with each other, and looking out for our communities as well. Because that's the other thing. Communities have been we haven't talked about this, but they've been so frayed over the last 30 years. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, we used to have block parties, and we'd have kids would go in the street by themselves, no problem, let's just running around on bikes, whatever. Now people are afraid to let their, 14-year-old daughter walk home 5 blocks, from a restaurant. Yeah. Because they're like, oh, there's going to be all the pedos on the street. And, look, there are legitimately more dangers probably, in some areas. But that kind of absence of community structure and fabric and support means that we're more desperate. So we're more likely to be led by the nose by whoever's in power, right?
And like on a larger scale in terms of community, like our country as a whole, I don't think we're together.
No, we're not.
I don't think we're
fractured.
together.
We're fractured.
We are so divided.
I know.
It's
very tragic.
Like,
and
where
of course,
are we going?
And there's other messages that we get sent about how, division is what we are. Like the whole message about Invasion Day and all that, right? Oh. That's like, okay, so all the white people today are to blame for all of the suffering of the black people for all of time, right? Yep. First of all, what a psychological burden is that?
That's
right?
some cook shit right
there. But but then this notion that when is it going to end? When can we just put this behind us and say, look, we're all Australians, we want to work together, we respect everybody, regardless of race, religion, color, blah, blah, blah.
Okay, so I got something to ask you. So on that note, what do you think about Australia becoming a republic? Because, and this is just my opinion, I know that the relationship between non-Indigenous Australians and Indigenous Australians is not an easy one to fix. Yeah. But something that I want to see happen for the good of Australia is we should push to become a republic. Mm-hmm. It's like we can all kind of get together, Indigenous Australians and non-Indigenous Australians, and we can all, look, this isn't us versus you. That we're all Aussie. Yeah. Let's love this country together. Yeah. They did this shit. Fuck the monarchy. Let's fuck them off. Like that. Honestly, I know it's not an easy fix, but if we all love our country, we should unite and start a new chapter. And what do you think about?
So I totally agree that we need that unification message, and we need something to believe in, and we need to all be behind it, and we need to, basically rediscover patriotism, essentially, right? Like
I'm a big patriot. I love this country so fucking much.
I know, this is why I've been battling for it.
Man.
I mean, I'm a naturalized Australian citizen, but I freaking love Australia, right? I mean, I love its beaches, I love its people, I love the weather,
best.
I love the kangaroos, I love it. And to see the absence of that kind of unity is really painful, right? Yeah. And I love things like the Olympics because I can barrack for the Australian team, right? I really love it. But I mean, honestly, I haven't thought about the Republic question that much.
Yeah.
I know that because I'm not native here, right? There's a contingent of Australians who feel very strongly that we should honor the kind of Western heritage we have, the UK heritage or whatever, by continuing the monarchy. And then there's another bunch who are like, we never really fully broke, and that's why we're so weak and so pliable. I honestly don't know. I do know that the Australians are very pliable, right? They're very compliant. When stuff goes down, they look to daddy, right? And daddy is the government of the day, right?
Yeah.
And King Charles is almost kind of a non-entity. Like, I don't even know if the monarchy, I mean, could you really even make an argument that, I'm sorry, hopefully he won't be listening to this.
What's the fucking point of this? King Charles, JJ's talking shit.
I mean, I just don't think that Australians are blaming him for our problems, right? Like, at the moment, in the grand scheme of things, I don't really think he's kind of here nor there, right? He's just a thing. And yeah, he visits, and there's this whole pomp and circumstance and whatever. And maybe the people who want us to continue as a monarchy think that maybe the respect that people have, or the sense of worship or awe that they have of the king and the whole everything he represents is powerful enough to serve as that unifying force that you're talking about. Maybe that's why they want that. Honestly, I can't. I don't really have a strong opinion either way. Right?
I mean, look, my family's British. My mum's Scottish.
Okay.
So, but I just, I couldn't give a fuck about the monarchy. Everyone, the Queen's birthday is sweet. I get a day off work. That's about it.
Yeah.
Or the King's birthday, sorry, whatever.
Yeah.
Bro, I don't care. I mean,
there's a contingent of Australians who do.
They live on the other side of the country. Like, the real thing is, like, our head of state should be Australian. That's what I think.
Yeah.
That's what
I mean, I empathize with that. And I think that this notion that we are self-determining is it would be important to me. But also, I'm a Yank, right? I mean, I come from a Revolutionary War background, right? In fact, my father and my mother's family fought on opposite sides of the Civil War.
Yeah, right.
And they go back to the Revolutionary War, right? And it's sort of, okay, there's a lot of history there on the South and the North, and I'm really connected to that. And I have that sort of self-determined psychology, right? And I know the Australians are different, which is kind of why I don't really take a position on it, because I just don't know what would be best considering the deep Australian cultural roots, which I just don't have really, right? I love the country to pieces, but I've not been here that long. So,
like, the thing is, I've got deep Australian roots.
Yeah.
When I say deep, I mean, like, I was born here.
You're born here. Yeah.
I was born here. I'm Aussie.
You're fully Aussie all the way through.
I'm fully Aussie, Western Sydney, born and raised.
Yep.
But I don't feel like I'm allowed to have a pride in my country kind of thing. That's one of the things that I think the machine is doing to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Here's the thing. My dad was born and raised here. Okay. Western Sydney as well. Born and raised, went to school here, graduated here, worked here, got married here, had kids here, still lives here, has lived his entire life here. I was born and raised here as well, and have done all these things, went to school, got a job, contributed to our country.
Yeah.
But for some reason, this isn't my country. That's what I'm told.
Don't even get me started.
And I mean, look, if I say that, I'm a racist now.
I'll give you a story.
But I'm not, honestly,
I do not believe you're a racist, Jack.
I'm not a racist.
I do not believe you're racist. I'll give you a story. So I was doing a conference about 10 years ago at UNSW. And it was only involving maybe 15 or 20 people. And I had to fly a couple people over from New Zealand. And anyway, everybody was there in this room finally at the beginning of the day, in the morning. And I got up to the podium to open the conference. And I said, welcome everybody, to the conference on whatever it was, right? And I started sort of saying, okay, the bathrooms are over there, and we're going to have this program, and who's going to speak first? And somebody from the audience piped up and said, where's the welcome to country?
Yeah, right.
And I hadn't even thought about it. Right?
Oh,
and I just said, I just kind of almost reflexively, I was like, everyone, welcome to the country. If you've come from overseas, it's a great place. And, we all respect each other, and I respect you, you respect me, and hopefully we'll have a great day. Right. And because what are we trying to say with it? What are we trying to say? Like, of course we respect the fact that there have been people here on this continent for eons. Right.
Yep.
And I also respect the fact that the Western culture that came here with Captain Cook and all the other settlers has propelled this country into the high quality of life that it has today.
Do you like Tucker Carlson?
I've watched a lot of him. Yeah.
I love that motherfucker straight out. I love Tucker Carlson so much. He came to Australia.
I know. We went to see him.
Honestly, I'm so jealous because when I saw that he was in Australia, I actually saw it only like a couple months ago, and he was here last year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. He was here last
when
year.
I saw that, I was like, bro,
Yeah.
I would have been there.
Yeah.
I
No.
wish I knew about it.
I mean, I don't agree with
It
everything he
missed
says,
me.
but man, he's strong. He's straight shooting. He's smart, and he just speaks his mind.
He's so
right?
good, and
And
he's got the funniest laugh.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, he's
It's
got
hilarious,
the funniest
right?
laugh.
It's very funny. I know.
But look, when he came to Australia, he I watched the video. You've probably seen it of
Oh, the press club.
Yeah, like he was talking. No, there was an actual episode where, like, on his YouTube channel, where he sits down and he's just talking him to the camera. But I also saw the press conference of him in I think it was Melbourne, that the video I saw.
Okay.
But what he said about Australia hit me hard. What he said about, we're being told that this isn't our country, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's your outsider point of view, by the way.
Yeah.
By the way.
No, it's true.
And like, I get excited when I see someone like Tucker Carlson coming over here and then telling me what they think about our country.
Yep.
He loves our country.
Exactly.
He was telling me how, well, not telling me, but
I had the private VIP ticket.
No, but he's telling us, like, oh, this is a beautiful country. The people are the best. Abundance of resources. We should be the most powerful country on the planet. And he's like, but why is it the way it is? Well, because of what our government's telling us.
That's it.
It's scary.
I know.
And why is there so many people, like, even Australians will hear that and be like, he's fucking crazy.
Well,
he's cool.
Look, I mean, if you want to say that, fine, but you got to do your own research, right? I mean, you can't. It's not fair. It's not respectful to just reject somebody because you say, you think, well, what they just said was not right. Like everything I disagree with that Tucker says, or that Trump says, or that anybody else says, I just disagree with it not because I'm like, well, that sounds like something bad, right? It's like, okay, on balance, do I really think that's the right way to go? Let's think about what that would do if we implemented that idea. I know you have to, follow the chain of argument. And all of science, all of thinking is just an exercise in giving your best guess, giving your best go at trying to piece together a sensible way to, make sense of the world, right? The very, very complex, dynamic world that we have. We're completely clueless about most of it, right? So we try to, incrementally. So it's always that. You're always making little judgments. But to make these kind of sweeping judgments based on just a shallow, one soundbite worth of something from someone, I think that's disrespectful. Honestly, it's 100%. Really disrespectful.
And that's what's happened. And this is the rise of not just social media, but ever since TikTok came along.
Yeah, I know.
TikTok fucked us up.
Yeah.
TikTok fucked us so hard because I believe that it's making our attention span weaker. Like, I've even noticed it in myself. I used to watch a lot of TikTok just sitting there scrolling.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Scrolling, screw bullshit.
By the way, keep that away from your daughter, by the way.
Oh, mate, don't even get me started. I've told my missus, I'm like,
no screens.
She ain't an iPad kid.
Good.
I hate to tell you, she ain't an iPad kid.
Good.
But look, our attention span is weaker, and I've noticed it in myself because I'd be watching a movie and then I lose interest. I used to be able to watch whole movies, and now I'm like 15 minutes in and I'm like, fuck, where's my phone?
Really?
Just a fucking scroll. So like I go through, I put myself through, like, every now and then I'll just be like, right, I'm deleting all social media.
Yeah.
Everyone around me thinks I'm crazy.
No,
but I'm like, I'm deleting all of it. I can't do it. I want to be off it for a little bit.
Good for you.
And it's good because, I think it's so toxic to us. But TikTok created this short. Sorry, this was the point I was originally getting to. TikTok has created this short, just scrolling 15 seconds, next, scrolling 15 seconds, next. Yeah. And that is what has created this whole, these short snippets of hearing what people say. We're getting like news channels with TikTok accounts and YouTube shorts or whatever, and that's how you find the news.
Yeah, no, exactly. And,
you know
and
what
it
I mean?
encourages people to make quick judgments.
Yeah,
right. And then
100%,
as does Twitter, actually, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like just a very brief little thing. I mean, forget about long form discussions like this. This is one of the reasons why I really support any organization, whether it's yours or there's also this one called Brisbane Dialogues, where they're trying to actually create space to have long form conversation with people who are thoughtful about issues and just explore, right? Because we used to do that all the time when I was a kid, right? And I remember it being not the smartest person in the room all the time in the 90s. And now It's
Oh,
like,
look, you're definitely the smartest
no,
person in the room right now. I'm like,
no, but I mean, like, it just, I
definitely.
feel like the IQ, average IQ has come down, right?
Yeah,
And I think it is
yeah.
because of the
It's
social
because of that.
media
It's
and
because of
there's this
that.
attention
Oh, without a
grabbing stuff.
doubt.
And
Without a
also,
doubt.
plus add to that all the psychological pressures that we've been talking about, right? If you are like, particularly if you're a white man today, but even if you're just like a regular Joe Blow, right? You think the climate's going, down the toilet. You think that, the gender relations aren't working. You're not going to find a spouse or whatever. Your kids are, scared and mentally ill or whatever. Maybe they have autism, who knows? You have all of these burdens on yourself, right?
Yep.
And so you have that, plus and that creates a need for release and for some kind of escape. And so then you're pushed even more into the social media. And then you get all this, quick succession stuff, which is like, hit. And you don't actually have to put any effort in to get these hits. And so you don't learn to sort of slow down and have some self-control and really enjoy something for the full length of its natural life, whether it's a movie or lovemaking or whatever else, right? And so we just get worse at doing so many natural human things, and that also destroys our society.
But the thing, like, I sit here and I say, yeah, I'm not having an iPad kid. She's not having this. She's not having that. Blah 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 blah. I want it to be,
Mm-hmm.
I'm worried that I'm also going to somehow be alienating her because, everyone's got
Sure.
devices, iPads.
Yep.
Kids have got fucking whatever.
They got everything.
Yeah, they got everything.
And so,
how much of an alien is she going to feel like?
Sure.
She's going to go to school. Oh, my friend's got iPads. Why don't I get it?
Yeah, sure. But did you and I have iPads when we were kids? No.
Well, look, maybe you might not have. I had.
You had a little bit.
I had video games. I had
video games.
I had phones. I had like.
Yep.
I was very. I'm 24.
Yep.
So I feel like I'm at the absolute birth. My childhood was like at the absolute birth of this era.
Yeah.
Like the very, very beginning.
Yep.
So I had it, but it was a lot more minimal.
Okay.
But it's so normal. Like I go out to eat with my family nowadays, and I look around. You see all these iPad kids and I feel like they're brain dead.
Yeah.
I think they're brain dead.
Yeah.
They're just sitting there, and parents are to blame as well.
Totally.
Parents
totally
are to blame hard because we're looking around and they're like, they give in to their kids. These iPads are the only way to keep their kids from, just have your iPad, shut up.
I know, absolutely right. And I see all that. And it's very, very difficult to be a parent today because of all those influences, right? Yeah. But I would really urge you for the first few years, at least. I mean, if you can, 10 years of your daughter's life, try to, first of all, no screens when they're really, really young. Yep. But then, as they get a little older, they will have to, if you put them into school, they'll start using screens, 100%. Right? So if you do homeschooling, you can do it on paper and pencil. And it's totally fine.
Oh, and look, I don't know if I can actually afford homeschooling.
Yeah, right.
Like in a way, like I don't know I don't know how I would be able to make that work. I mean, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But I'm just saying, like,
it's rough.
It definitely seems like the best option.
Yep. I agree. And particularly if you can do it in a community where you've got like, people there who can teach particular things. Like, I think that would be a really cool way to do it, is like you have some families that can teach woodworking and some can teach music and some can teach, physical sport, whatever, and you can put together a beautiful program. And probably got some ex-school teachers, my husband's ex-high school math and science teacher, he could teach that sort of stuff. You can imagine putting together a community where you actually have a great experience for kids going, schlepping from one house to the next and getting lessons and various stuff. But I think, you can teach children how to basically manage themselves in an uncertain, dynamic, fraught with danger kind of world, but a world that also offers huge amounts of opportunity. I mean, the fact that we have all this technology and internet now also is a huge benefit.
It's mad,
right?
Like it should be a great thing.
And
but like everything, yin yang, everything, there's a bad with the good.
So our job over the next 15 years, basically, is work out how can we actually deploy these various new technologies in a way that is pro-human, a way that actually helps us have more lives, better lives, and longer lives, right? Yeah. And so that, for me, one of the areas would be like medical diagnostics. Like I would like you or me to be able to go to our doctor and be like, hey, I have this combination of symptoms, blah, 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 blah. The doctor's like, okay, let's use some, AI assistance here, diagnostic assistance, and work out what this could be. Oh, here's 5 options. You could have, brain cancer, blah, 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 or, just mold or whatever, right? Yeah. And that could help hugely because, of course, each doctor only has so much information in his or her head, right, based on their experience. And so that's one kind of example where I think it's possible to move to a better sort of protocol, I guess, for supporting people that does use some of our new technologies, but just uses it in a smart way.
I think AI is going to help a lot with with medical benefits because you're going to be able to do exactly what you just said without even leaving the house. Just bring up GPT or whatever. I do it now. I already do it.
Exactly. So, I do it too. But I mean, if you could make that kind of draw on the world's medical experience, my gosh, you'd have a powerful tool, right? And of course, then you have a dangerous tool too. Anything powerful is dangerous. But you have to think about institutional design. How do you work this out so that maybe it's region specific, or you have certain kind of subscription models, or what do you have to have lots of different checks and stuff to make sure that nobody gets hold of stuff and can weaponize it, because we know that will be weaponized. Right?
100%. And that's scary because robots being weaponized is what we all fear, really.
Exactly.
So
but I wouldn't worry too much about that. Just on a positive note, I'm actually not as worried about robots like a Terminator kind of future, because to this point, all AI has been able to do is just do what people program it to do, just really, really, really well.
But that's the scary part as well. It's doing what people are programming it to do.
Absolutely. So but it's still the people.
Once it's powerful, but once it is good enough to be a doctor, once it is good enough to, run a government or whatever the fuck,
Sure, but
whoever's programming it it'll have an agenda for sure.
Yeah, but that it's still the human behind it who is the danger, not the AI. The human behind it, the motivations of that human, that's where the danger is. It's not that the AI is going to start deciding, oh, I'm going to now go for this different objective. And that requires conscience and soul and all sorts of, stuff that AI doesn't have. So it's still, in some sense, our slave. And from that perspective, I'm not as worried as some people are.
Yeah. So with the school system too, right? I actually believe that the school system is a certain way to keep us slaves. You know what I mean? And there's a theory that the Rockefellers actually founded all of this.
Yeah.
Look,
I don't know. I mean, look, I believe that people say, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. What is a conspiracy theory? Is a conspiracy theory the theory that sometimes people conspire to get things that they want? Well, if you don't believe in that, then you're not a student of history, right? Like, obviously people will do that. People in power will collude to keep their power and get more power. Sure. Do I believe that, people at the heads of really, rich, like families and organizations like the Rockefellers had evil intent and genuinely wanted to create a society which had layers of hierarchy, and there was some kind of feudalistic structure where there's all these serfs would be kept enslaved, and I don't really believe that, just because I think most people are good. Now, there are a few psychopaths out there, for sure. And there's probably some people who've been badly programmed, badly scarred, and all this, sure. But the vast majority of people want to think of themselves as good people, and they are actually motivated by that altruism we talked about earlier. They actually want to help other people. They want to help the world. They want to help something bigger than themselves, because they recognize that's where real happiness comes from, which is true, right? So they just come up with all sorts of justifications and rationalizations why what they're doing, which is actually good for them, is somehow good for these other people.
So do you think like these elites that are low-key running the world, are they evil?
What's the word evil mean? I mean, they are very, very misguided. And I think in some cases, they are just so broken that they may not ever be able to be really rehabilitated and actually recognize what's happening. I just think a very small proportion of them is genuinely psychopathic and sociopathic. But there is going to be a proportion, but I think it's a reasonably small number.
So even people like Elon Musk, right, who's very influential, obviously, creating... Well, he's the richest man in the world, first of all. With money comes power. But on top of that, he's creating electric cars, which is supposed to be what we need, this and that. He's labeled crazy. He's labeled all sorts of crazy shit. Like, I love Elon Musk, but let me just say, I love him so much.
My son wants to work for him.
Wants to work for him?
Yeah, he's doing a PhD in physics at the moment. He wants to work for SpaceX or something when he gets out.
I love SpaceX so much. And so this is what I don't understand. Like, why are we not looking at Elon Musk like a fucking god, pretty much? Like,
well, that's dangerous. But...
I know. I'm not saying like, right, he's trying to get us to Mars, man.
Yeah, well, the thing I like the most, honestly, about Elon, like, I do think he's probably high in his own petard, right? But because most guys who get to that level are just like,
maybe I'm just gullible as fuck.
No, I don't think you are.
He seems so genuine.
He does seem genuine.
I don't think there's a bit of evil in him at all. I hear people say, oh, he's in it for the money. He's just making billions off of whatever. Right.
I mean, he probably does. He obviously wants the money, right? And I think he does.
I don't think so.
I think he wants the money. I mean, look,
I don't reckon.
It's very, very rare that you get a person, a human, who doesn't think it's he would rather have a high money situation for himself than a low money situation. But I agree with you. I don't think that is actually his kind of
number one
primary
driving
motivation,
force.
right?
Yeah,
I think he
100%.
doesn't mind it. The money's great, but
Yeah,
I think
loves the money.
I think the idea, exactly, right? But I think the idea of progress and like discovering new things,
that's what
and
I think he's
that's
about.
pretty kind of
100%.
motivating
I
him.
think he genuinely wants to get human beings to Mars.
Yep.
And I think when he started Tesla as well, because he was one of, if not the first, to really make a push in electric vehicles and whatnot.
Yep.
I think that's pure good intention.
Yep. No, I think I tend to agree with you. The one thing that I really like the most about Elon, honestly, was his action with Twitter.
Yeah,
because
really?
because he bought it, and he bought it for a hell of a lot of money, right?
Oh yeah.
And then he basically cleaned it out and said, we're not censoring people anymore. So to my mind, that is probably the biggest service he could have done right then, because now we've got X, and people are less likely, at least, to be censored on X than they used to be, right? They can pretty much reasonably speak a lot more freely than they could. And that, as you said before, freedom of speech is kind of a part of the foundation. We've got to support that.
100%.
And he literally put his money where his mouth couldn't have been otherwise, right? And that's awesome. That's something I really, really admire about him.
100%. Elon Musk is a man. What a guy. And like, there's a video online of him. I think he's on 60 Minutes Australia actually, and the interviewer asks him like, are you aware that many Australians are struggling to pay rent, this and that, because of whatever. And he starts tearing up.
Yeah, I know.
Like, he starts crying. And I'm like, bro. And people just look at him and go, what a cooker.
Yeah.
Honestly, but I look at that and I'm like, bro, what a pure human.
No, I get a good sense from him too.
And you get, but a lot of people don't.
Yeah, I know.
Which is
interesting,
weird.
right?
It's very weird.
But I also the part of me that is skeptical is the intellectual part, right? From the heart part, I agree with you, right? Like I too feel like, well, maybe I'm gullible, I'm not sure, but it seems like he means good. Yeah. But I also just know people in positions of high power and money, they do get corrupted eventually, and oftentimes they get there because they really liked it. So I'm kind of trying to be rational about it. But honestly, if you compare him to many of the other super rich dudes in the world,
100%.
Whoa, is he doing so much better?
100%.
Right? For the human race.
And you know what's good about him as well, to defend him. I got you back, Elon Musk. I got you. All right. To defend him a little bit, he was on the left.
Yeah, he was.
And then he switched.
Yep, he was a lefugee.
He was
Yep.
And then he switched because something happened with his son transitioning to a girl, and then he was like, what the fuck is going on? This is all
okay. Yep.
Yep. And that's why he switched.
Yep.
That's why he got all buddy with Trump.
Exactly. Which shows principles, right? It shows that he is maintaining principles even when groups kind of float around and maybe abandon those principles. Because back, 40 years ago, I can tell you the left was not what it is today. The left was not a death cult, right? It was very different. And it actually genuinely was attractive to people who had a heart and wanted the good things for the people. And the right, by contrast, was, had the image, at least, of being a bunch of kind of money obsessed, materialist, atomistic guys who didn't care about other people, right? And just wanted to make sure that they had enough money in the bank, right? Or something. And so it was basically for the young
that's
people.
That's still how it is. That's still what they say it is. Everyone on the right, if you're liberal, then all you care about is funding the billionaires.
This is one of the reasons why I think right left is really not helpful anymore. Like, just that
There's
dichotomy.
No point picking sides.
Why are we? No, it's like I don't even know what I am. I mean, I think I'm basically apolitical. Like, I don't. And the reason I say that is, like, I'm not barracking for what a particular party says just because the party says it, right? Like, that's not good enough. I'm sorry. I will be, and I will support people on balance, but I almost never do I agree 100% with whatever that person says.
100%.
Right? Almost never, because
100%.
like, I'm a different person, right? So obviously, if I'm thinking about stuff for myself, I'm going to come to different conclusions, and that's okay, right? And so I think we need to get away from that right-left thing. We need to start thinking, what are policies that are actually good for human beings? And that is the kind of platform we got to build and then work towards in Australia, but also in the West as a whole.
And what we got going on right now, is not best for human beings.
No,
like, they are really pushing that this whole gender bullshit is best for us. We need to be, we need to support them. They have a right. Like, look, I'm someone who thinks that we only have one life. Like, honestly, we do. We got one life.
I think that's a fact.
Cheers. Yeah, fact check me. Look, no, we got one life, okay? And if you want to live your life a certain way, go and do it.
Exactly.
I
If you're an
could
adult,
not give a
couldn't
fuck.
care, right?
If
Your
you want to
choice.
chop your dick off
Yeah.
and pretend to be a woman, go hard. Go hard. Well, not literally anymore, but look, go hard.
At least
do
if
what
you're
you
like 18 or older, right? Yeah.
do whatever you want to do, but don't start pushing that on more than me. My kids in school.
Yeah, exactly.
You're pushing that on everyone in society. Like this is normal. Oh, don't fuck with it.
No, totally. It's very
Oh,
dangerous.
don't fuck with it.
It's very dangerous.
But and you also, if you want to go down that path, you
Mm.
also kind of need to be self-aware enough to be like, I'm a bit weird. No, I think so. I think you do, but like if you're gonna do some weird shit, you need to understand.
Good luck with
like,
that. Good luck with trying to get that self-image in there because there's a huge defense against that now, right? About admitting that maybe some of this sort of stuff comes from some kind of scar tissue somewhere, maybe, or something. And, I'd like to be able to talk about it openly with people, but it's very difficult. I just was off the phone the other day with a friend from high school who, I mean, she's right in the middle of, she's in Vermont or something, or New Hampshire. She's right in the middle of everything blue, all the sort of left wing, whatever stuff is all over the place. And her daughter almost got caught up in this, and she almost cut off her boobs, right?
wow.
And this was like
See,
5 years ago or something. I know.
That's
and this is what
scary.
woke her up because she was also very much hard left, for like, I remember in high school she was definitely.
Yep.
And she was talking to me. She's like, Gigi, I can't believe what's happening. I'm starting to wake up. I just realized because my daughter almost got. And then like, 2 or 3 years later, the daughter was like, Mom, I think I'm just gay. And I was like, oh, right. So thank goodness, right? So, okay, you're not going to mutilate yourself. You're just going to get to adulthood and then fine, you'll figure it out. But it was her maternal love, basically, that, opened her eyes, that caused her to stop just eating the candy with the wrapper on all the time, right? It's like, no, I really got to figure out what's in that candy.
So this is the thing that's happening to so many kids is like, there's things that I'm embarrassed about from my childhood. Like, fuck, I can't believe I wore that. That wasn't fucking cool. What the fuck am I doing there? Oh, that's cringe. You know what I mean? Kids nowadays are going to grow up and be like,
yeah,
cut my cock off.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, unbelievable consequences.
God
Unbelievable.
damn.
And this is not healthy for these children.
It's shocking.
I mean, you think that this is going to help them. I mean, maybe briefly for, a couple months at some point. It's like the vaccines, maybe you get some kind of brief feeling of relief or something. And then you got to carry this stuff with hormone treatment and an unhealthy body basically for the rest of your life.
Yeah, that's
for
it.
the rest of your
That's
life.
it. It's
right?
gone now for good.
And these people somehow, they can't vote and they can't decide whether to, travel on their own. They can't do so many things, but yet we let them mutilate their bodies.
Yeah.
Like their actual reproductive potential, we let them mess with that. Like, that's just insane, right? It's insane. So no matter how, I mean, I agree with you. Like I'm very kind of, I don't like to call myself a particular thing, but kind of libertarian minded-esque, I guess, in terms of like, let people do what they want, because that's where we get innovation actually, right? We actually you allow people to try stuff out and you realize what works and what doesn't.
Like
right?
I actually don't have a problem with transgenders. I
No,
genuinely,
neither do I.
Honestly, if you want to do that, go do that.
Fine, do it, whatever.
Do it.
But I don't see. I believe enough in sort of that not being a successful strategy for everybody that I don't think that it's going to sort of spread and make everybody transgender. Like I'm never going to want to be a boy. Sorry, I'm just not. I just don't think it's going to spread that much. We will discover. I have faith in humanity. We will discover that is not a workable direction for most people to go on our own without having to suppress it or ban it or something else. Because as soon as you ban stuff and suppress stuff, it becomes taboo and it becomes cooler and it becomes as a black market and all this sort of stuff. Right?
But this brings me back to the whole school system, because I don't think they are like schools are making this okay.
I know
they are making this okay.
And you know whose responsibility?
So
I
don't know who is going to stand up against it and be like
the parents. The parents are the only ones.
The parents are allowing this.
I know, and they are failing their children.
100%.
So
they're ruining their children's
where,
lives.
Absolutely. That is where the responsibility must lie. The parents have to discover their love for their kids, and they have to discover their sanity, and they got to bring it to the schools and say, we do not accept this. That is just that is what has to happen. And if that means that some parents have to stay out of paid work because they have to be around to be shadowing, the school teachers or the story hours or whatever's happening, then so be it. That's a sacrifice you got to make.
It's kind of set up for us to fail because not many people are going to be willing to stand up against the system.
Not right
like
now.
that,
Not right now. But back in 2020, March 2020, I thought there were not many people. But now look at me having this conversation with you, and look at us having conversations with people all over the place now about stuff we couldn't talk about at the time: lockdowns, mask mandates, social distancing. I mean, you can even talk about the vaccines a little bit now, right?
Yeah.
And that's totally different. So we do move, right? We make progress as a society. And you just got to start somewhere. And so if you are a parent with a kid in a school that's doing this sort of stuff, make your views known to the principal. Say, this is not okay.
Yeah.
And I will talk to the media. I will write to my congressperson or my MP.
I've thought about how I'm going to be in this type of situation as a dad.
Good.
I will.
Because you
I will pull up at the fucking school.
You got to protect them.
And I will let that president know. And to be president, fucking the principal. I've actually thought like when it does come time for her to go to school.
Yeah.
I'm gonna kind of be interviewing schools.
Absolutely.
Like honestly, I'm not just gonna enroll my kid to any school. I want to meet the principal. I want to talk to him. I want to be like, what's going on here?
What are your principles?
Yeah, 100%.
Principles of the principal.
Yeah.
And you want to visit some classes. You want to see what kind of programming they have for the kids.
Yeah.
And oftentimes they have the programming they have because that's what's on offer. If the parents say, hey, I can run a math class, hey, I'll teach calculus to the year 11s, or hey, I'll teach, primary school teachers, whatever, I don't know, literacy or woodworking or whatever it is. Offer that because that makes it easier for the principal. You make it easier for the principal to say yes, and that makes it more likely the thing will happen. So if you have, I will organize a story hour with, people who are reading to the kids books that are sort of standard in the canon, like The Little Engine That Could or Dr. Seuss or whatever, right? Instead of some of the newfangled weird stuff that's coming down the tracks, just go back to what I read when I was a kid, and the 80s was not a bad time actually for babies books, kids books. And so I still have some of my own books. I'm going to give them to my daughter when she has kids, right? Because it's like, that's great.
kids books and kids shows and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly.
Are you seeing some of the shit they're watching?
It's awful.
There's a show about, I don't know what it's called, but it's like a transgender horse.
Oh my gosh.
Cartoon. It's like, actually, I feel like whatever.
Oh my gosh.
Right, and this is what kids are watching. Like.
Look, but the only thing you can do is have some alternative available, because what gets rid of that is competition.
Yeah,
it's just economics. It's basic economics, right? And so I'm doing the same thing. I'm trying to do the same thing in the area of all the reforms that I'm thinking about. Right? It's like we got to have an alternative system here and prove that in pilots or small scale implementation that it can work, and then that will draw business essentially away from the models that are failing. So if you prove you can create better health in a healthy community with not so many big pharma drugs and more focus on nutrition and family and all sorts of stuff that's positive for health, then that will be attractive for people because they genuinely do want to be healthier. Most of them, they'd rather be healthy than not healthy. It's like money. You'd rather have more than, not have as much. And so that provides an alternative, because at the moment there's very little alternative to the standard, medical system, and similarly to the standard programming for kids in the television or the standard educational curricula. So you need to have an alternative for people to go to.
But like when you look at, for example, the last election result, that was a landslide. That was a landslide.
I think it was not as much of a landslide as it was said, but yes, it was definitely very, very pro-labor. Yep.
Yeah. And so like how many people are really Labor represents that whole group.
But
it's a problem. Oh, let me just tell you real quick. Susan Ley becoming the leader of the Liberal Party.
Yeah.
Literally my last preference. I was like, when I saw that happened, I was like,
oh
bro,
my gosh,
we're cooked.
Yeah, but when you say it's a landslide, right? I think some people make the mistake to say, everybody who voted for Labor or for that matter for Liberal, really thought it through and knew what the policies were, and on consideration and reflection decided to vote for Labor. Not true, right? The vast majority of people who voted for Labor, I would guess, like way over 60%, will have just sort of cast the vote for that party because that's what they've always done. Their parents have done. They think if that's the thing to do, it's a social identity thing. Yeah. It's a habit thing. It has nothing to do with thought.
More people need to start, really asking questions and just wake up. I was raised Labor. My dad's Labor hard. Still to this day, we have mad arguments about it.
Wow.
Still to this day.
Interesting. That must be so interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. And like every family dinner, I'm like, so, my boy Donald Trump. Start mad beef.
Look, it's great you can have those conversations.
Yeah,
That's
no, it's good because
actually
there's
huge.
no like actual beef between me and my dad, obviously, but we've got different political views. So
Look,
I love talking to him about politics.
man, you're so lucky. My father has been totally estranged from my two half brothers, his two sons, on the Trump issue.
Yeah.
So my dad is very pro, and my two half brothers are dyed in the wool Democrats,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And they've even said some nasty stuff to me on email, even though I kind of stay out of the political stuff as much as I can. But they're completely delusional, right? And my dad has lost and he's 94, and he's lost his relationships with his sons over this political stuff.
Yeah, my missus actually always tells me like, Jack, don't talk politics. It's
Yeah.
like, don't talk politics because
That was always
it'll
the
cause big family
advice.
drama. I'm
Yeah.
like, bro, I don't give a fuck.
The advice was don't talk about politics or religion, right? Those are the two you got to stay away from,
Yeah.
supposedly. I don't know. But I think you got, honestly, like, I find I have the most interesting conversations with people about exactly those two things,
Yeah.
right? And without having to like take a stand on anything
Yeah.
necessarily, but just explore people's beliefs.
I really want to talk to people with different views.
Totally. Me too.
And
Absolutely.
look, honestly, like I've only just gotten into politics in very recent years,
Yep.
like over the last year or two.
Yep.
And I'm not that knowledgeable, but like, come educate me, honestly. Come
Yeah.
teach me, tell me your way of thinking.
Absolutely.
Tell me why you think what you think. I'll hear you out.
Yep.
Like, I'm not gonna see you as the other side, and like, we're not enemies, man.
Yeah,
We're
no,
all
exactly.
humans.
Everybody's human.
We're all
Everybody's
human.
human, right? And
I
you just
respect
wanna,
your beliefs.
Totally. I know. I don't care what people believe.
Of
I always say this, right? I really just could not care less what people believe. I want to be able to come across, people I can have a conversation with
Yeah.
about what we're going to do,
Yeah.
right? Not just what is the truth, what is the belief, because we never know truth. We're always trying to get to it. We always have our best guess in our head, but like people are going to differ and whatever. What we have to decide on is what are we going to do as a society? How are we going to build our society? What's the institution going to look like? And how are we going to set up the various services that we need? And what's the right balance between public and private sector? And all these kinds of questions, right? About how you set up a Western society. And we need to collaborate on that stuff. And if we are just saying, well, I'm going to cancel anybody who doesn't have the same beliefs as me, you're basically canceling everybody else in the world.
100%.
Because you're never going
And
to
this
have
is why
exactly
people are
the same
scared to
beliefs.
speak up.
Exactly.
This is why people are scared to speak up. They're scared
Yep.
to be cancelled.
They're scared to be canceled and then left out on the cold, right?
100%.
And then they're not part of any kind of conversation, right?
Yeah, like,
So
this
we
is a
need to
big
have so
problem.
much more of this.
This
I
is
mean,
a-
I've had people refuse to share a stage with me on COVID policy issues,
Yeah,
right?
so that's cool.
Who are
That's
just
fucked
who
up.
are pro, and I'm like, I want to have a conversation. Please, I
Yeah.
really want to have a conversation about this.
Yeah.
Tell me what was going on because I have my theories about it. Maybe I'm wrong,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we could always be wrong. You always have to have that humility as a scientist, right? You always give your best guess, but and you can make the arguments for it or whatever. But then it's like, well, but it could be wrong, and I want to be proven wrong. Oh my God, I'd love to be proven wrong about
Yeah.
COVID,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
so far it hasn't happened.
Please.
I would really love it, right? I mean, we really need that. So I think Australia as a whole, we need to find a way to talk to each other again. We need to have a
Yeah.
kind of reconciliation, kind of like, and I've talked about this before, but I think one of the models we could follow is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission from South Africa after apartheid. They had this model. It was very community based. It was like people get together, like Black people, white people, and just talk to each other and say, like, when you did this, it hurt my family. And the other guy says, I'm sorry. Right. And they talk, okay, here are the pains that have happened. And the guy says, I really didn't mean that. Or I tried this and I was really misguided and I was just going for such and such. And I can see now it was wrong. And that kind of conversation, like we know that kind of conversation heals people in relationships. It can heal people in communities too.
Yeah.
And we need to have space for that. And we need
Yeah.
to platform that sort of stuff. And we're doing none of that now. Zero of that, right? It's just more flame throwing and mudslinging and canceling, and it's just not going in the right direction at the moment. So I hope that we will get there, but it's going to be a few years still, at least, I think.
It's kind of not that I think I'm gonna rise to any type of fucking any
Fame and fortune.
but it's kind of why I started this podcast, to be
Right.
honest. Like when
Okay.
I started getting into politics and I kind of woke up thinking like, I don't like the way my country that I love so dearly, I don't like the direction it's going in.
Yep.
You kind of want a voice,
Yeah.
you
do.
know, and I like that I'm able to have whoever
Yep.
in here and just talk
Yep.
and talk about shit that no one's really gonna be prepared to talk about anywhere else.
Yeah. No,
Not,
it's a huge service. It's a huge service to the country. It really is.
like
Right?
I kind of want to be able to talk to anyone, and I don't have to agree with you.
Yeah.
I'll have you on. I'll
Oh,
talk to you.
In fact, it's even more interesting if you don't.
100%.
Right?
Right.
Right.
One of my girlfriend's friend, she's like, complete other side of politics. I'm trying to get her
wow.
on.
Okay.
I'm trying to get her on.
Awesome. Awesome.
And it's going to be, it'll probably get heated, but
Yeah. But that's great. I mean, and again, you
I
want
think
it
it
to
would be a
be,
great episode.
yeah, exactly. It's an
honest.
opportunity. And you can, what you can try to go for, at least this is what they try to do with the Brisbane Dialogue stuff, is they get people from, totally different areas, perspectives basically on a particular big social or economic or political issue. And they try to find common ground. So I was on the first one of these that they ran in Brisbane about universal basic income. And they had people who were way pro and way anti and in the middle and whatever. And what we could all agree on at the end was that a negative income tax was a plausible policy, like one that's probably a good idea, which is basically like, you reverse tax people who are enter the labor market at really low income, and have like a small amount of income. But basically is an extra incentive for them to start working, and be able to actually feed a family more on those wages that they would get, right? And so everybody could agree on that. So it's like, okay, that really is pretty good evidence that you should take that to the political class or the bureaucracy or whatever and say, hey, try this, because people from across the aisles seem to think it's a good idea. So what you could try is with her and be like, okay, I want to come out with.
I don't think she's coming on, to be honest.
Oh, well, for anybody.
She's like, I don't think it's a good idea. I'm like, right, it's a good idea. Come on.
Well, why is it not a good idea?
I don't know. This is what I'm saying. I think she's a lot smarter than I am, and she thinks I need someone more on my level, apparently.
Seriously.
That was what I got.
That's pretty insulting.
Oh, well, the conversations I had with her, I already got like a certain vibe, and I was like, I felt like I was already being lectured. And I was like, mate, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. It's good that you're smart.
Yeah,
exactly. It's good that you're way more knowledgeable in politics than me. But she also made a comment about she's like she found it funny that young men are all of a sudden getting into politics.
She found it funny.
Yeah, like that's something to be like, oh, I wonder why this is happening. And I'm like, well.
I would just ask her to unpack that. Like, honestly, there's so much that comes out of that sort of side, right? The brainwashed people, they just sort of come at you with a kind of an image, and it's like, okay, what are you actually trying to say? And if you actually finally get to it, eventually they don't have a point really. Oftentimes, I mean, maybe she may very well have a point, but oftentimes it's just a defense, and you got to just get beyond the defense and get to the core of the matter, which is often just something pretty inconsequential.
Do you know who Abby Chatfield is? Oh, she's an Aussie like political influencer kind of thing. Okay. Fuck, she's obnoxious.
Okay.
Nah, I find it. There's a episode of something on YouTube. It's like it's like 6 people with different political views, and they're all kind of debating each other. It's like an open debate.
Okay, yeah.
And she was so hard to watch. And I find a lot of people with those views, I kind of find them somewhat similar. Like they're very, and I'm not like putting them all in one category.
Yeah, sure.
I probably sound like a bit of a gronk, but like I find these people who have been brainwashed like this.
Yeah, exactly.
So like they just jump down your throat and like, nah, you're a fucking asshole.
No, exactly. It's defense. You know what I mean? It's defense.
Yeah, and
because
like
that's what they've had to play.
the condescending like scoffs, like
exactly.
What the fuck? It's hard to explain because I'm not. I'm not that knowledgeable, but it's just the vibe I get from a lot of these people.
I know exactly what you mean, and I experienced that during COVID a lot. Right? And I just have no time for that because, and also I'm a professor, right? I've got a PhD. Like I have enough trophies in my cabinet. I'm not going to be intimidated by anybody who says that they're more scientific or whatever than I am. I was like, no, I'm a scientist. I'll go head to head with any scientist any day. Thank you very much. So I'm not affected by that stuff, but I see it as a bunch of layers of defense that have been put in place because they have subscribed to the crowd as a substitute for thinking. That's what's happened. And when you do that, you have to protect the fact that you don't really know what's going on. Yeah. Because you haven't really thought about it. Yeah. Right? You've taken it on faith, basically.
And also, no one who is going to be having these debates is in the inner circle.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like, right, what do you think you know?
Yeah. I know.
You're not one of them, mate.
Exactly. Well, and that's the thing. These beliefs, so-called, that a lot of these people will have, they've never been tested in real life, right? They've never actually had to, run a country on the basis of those principles or have a conversation and with somebody who really disagrees and defend that, heartily. And what was it that John J.S. Mill said, right? He who knows only his side of the case knows little of that. Yeah. And it's so true. So if you've just been, surrounding yourself with people who believe the same thing, if you're in an echo chamber, it happens in social media land all the time anyway, right? If you let yourself go down that path, of essentially just narrowing the field from which you're drawing your information, you will become like that. You will become weaker. You will become, mentally less able, less really understanding of why you believe what you believe, and more prone to have to develop defenses because of that insecurity, because of that vulnerability. And so you end up with these layers and layers of defense, and then it's just very difficult to have a conversation with somebody like that because you're never talking about anything real. You're talking about their psychology. It's like, okay, we're still dealing with you. Okay, how long is this going to go? Let's go. Okay, blah, 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 right? And it's really, you have to just keep going till you finally get to something. And it's usually like, I'm scared. It's like, okay.
Oh,
it's okay.
Have you
It's okay.
seen, wait, do you know who Andrew Wilson is?
No.
Oh, man. you gotta watch him. He's so fucking funny. He's a savage. He's a savage.
Okay.
I'd assume he's on the right side of politics just from a lot of what he, a lot of his views.
Yep.
Look up the Whatever podcast when you get a chance.
The Whatever podcast.
The Whatever podcast. It's
okay.
He gets these random feminists on, and absolutely, because this guy's smart. This guy's smart as fuck.
Okay. Yeah.
He puts them to bed so hard.
Oh wow.
Sometimes they go.
So did you reduce some of them to just like crying a little?
I was showing my missus one last night. I'm like, look what she makes this one cry. She does. She full starts crying. And then he will make fun of him.
See, that's just sort of sad though. Like, I mean, I appreciate the spectacle of it.
Look,
I appreciate the spectacle. But at the same time, like these people are people, right? And like the more that happens, the thing is, I know what happened during COVID, right?
But the people he's talking to are so deluded. And I think his savageness is pretty warranted sometimes.
Look, it probably is.
Like, honestly, because some of the attacks I see on him, like they start telling him, oh, are you married? Oh, your wife is so unlucky. Shit like that. Like, you know what I mean? They go after him, these people. Like, they're unable to have friendly debates.
Exactly.
We
no,
can't
that's
just
gone out.
exchange words.
That's gone out the window.
That era's gone.
I know, exactly. But I'll tell you why I have a bit of hesitation about it. I appreciate the spectacle. Okay. But anybody else who has those views, who happens to see that, right? Is going to double down on, well, I'm definitely never going to have a conversation with somebody who disagrees with me because that's going to happen to me. And I know they'll think that way because that happened to me and my profession during COVID. So few other economists spoke out because they saw what happened to me.
Because you advocate for people dying.
Yeah, well, that was it.
Because you're an animal.
I'm a granny killer. I'm actually a neoliberal Trump cannot death cult warrior, if truth be told. Yeah.
Oh yeah, well that's where we're at. Like we're scared to debate, and if we feel a little bit uneducated, I think we're scared to
we're scared
our opinion as well.
Well, we're also scared to admit that we don't actually know. That's another thing. Like with the Republic question, I honestly haven't done enough research about it. I don't have a firm opinion. I just know that there's some cultural stuff that's very, close to the heart of the Australian people deeply. And I can't really relate to that. And I'm sure something is probably better than the other, but I don't know which one it is. So I'm not prepared to take a really strong position on that. Right.
Yeah.
But there are other issues, which I like lockdowns, which I've researched till the dogs come home and I can be like, yep, that is a bad idea. Right. Yeah. And I can tell you exactly why. But then, having that ability to sort of distinguish between different areas where you may or may not have as much information or whatever, that's also something that's gone out of the window. Like you're supposed to be an expert on everything now. You're supposed to like have an opinion at least on everything, mostly. And then, only strategically, occasionally do you say, oh, well, I don't know. I'm going to defer to the expert over there. And that's when your crowd is saying that's the guy to listen to.
Well, right? I think one of the pros of a democracy is that I'm just a regular citizen.
Yep.
I should, my opinion is very valid, whether I'm educated or not.
Totally. Absolutely.
Like what I feel, I'm still a human being.
Yep.
I may not be the prime minister. I may not be a scientist.
No, but
I may
you
not
count.
be in any position of power.
Yep.
But why is it that, we can't speak up?
No, you count. You count just as much. In fact, I would say that the being in touch with reality is something that is much easier for people who are outside of these kind of institutions of authority and learning, like universities and the bureaucracy and whatnot, because you're actually face to face with real life stuff every day. Like people who work with their hands, people who take real risks, they would have seen COVID and they would have been like, what? Right? Because like if they're like, I don't know, cleaning skyscrapers windows every day or something, they're taking their life in their hands when they go up there 100%. And then they're like, right, I'm worried about a cold. I'm going to shut down the entire economy just because of a cold. What?
It worked, but I mean, there's a lot of people in construction who were
They were genuinely scared, but they were
Genuinely
still
scared,
less
and
of a problem, honestly, for the perpetuation of the madness than the people in the universities and the institutions. Those people really lost the plot hard because
yeah,
they, they had all their professional integrity and expertise bound up with this whole notion that, oh, well, the experts, blah, 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 because we're experts. So if we want to have expertise respected, we better respect the experts and all this
mm,
sort of
mm,
nonsense. And they're used to writing on the whiteboard these, pretty worlds which never are going to really come to pass in reality, and they don't really care as much as they used to a generation ago about the plight of the society that pays their salaries. It used to be that was something that mattered in academia, whether or not you're doing work that's relevant or helpful to the society. Doesn't matter anymore, really. I mean, there's some kind of attempts like lip service to get back to that with impact and engagement, but really, the real impactful, engaging stuff like what we're doing right now, that sort of
yeah.
stuff. I mean, my university would probably not care at all about it. If they come across it, they might actually, try to punish me for it.
I'll send it to him.
Thanks very much. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it, Jack. It's great. But I mean, like, honestly, it doesn't matter whether what you do in academia is really helpful or not.
Yeah.
What matters is you can make it seem like it's helpful, and you can get it into elite journals and all that stuff. You can get grants from the government, and those are the big gold stars that get you promoted. So so basically, there's a lot of incentives to just keep the delusion going in these institutions, which are not there in the case of your construction worker colleagues or anybody who's working with his hands or just outside of those structures. The Amish. The Amish didn't have a COVID era, right? They basically just went on with their lives.
Really?
There was no blip. There was nothing. There was nothing because they didn't have televisions, right? They're not connected to the wider world through the mass media, so they didn't even notice. It wasn't a thing in the Amish world, right? And I come from that area, so I come from Pennsylvania, where there's the Pennsylvania Dutch are there, and I used to go to a camp which was in Amish country, so I know what these people are like. They're lovely, really down to earth people, and they just they don't take nonsense, right? And they just they weren't listening to the news all the time, so they didn't get caught up in everything.
Was there any countries that were like, no, we're not doing that?
Yeah, a couple African countries initially. There was I think the president of Tanzania gave a PCR test to a papaya and also one to a goat, and they came back positive, and he used this to try to be like, look, see, this is so silly. But I think that didn't go over very well with the authorities. But yeah, there are a couple, these societies that are really far away from the modern world. They are the ones who basically remained unscathed because they just didn't follow the madness. And so if there's any proof you need that it was madness, that's pretty reasonable proof.
What was it like in the Middle East?
That was pretty bad. It was pretty bad.
Really?
Yeah. So I have a colleague who was there.
Is there countries that disconnect more from the Western world than those in the Middle East?
Oh, the Middle East and the U.S. are closer than you think. Right?
Really?
Oil.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah.
So yeah, no, I mean Saudi Arabia had vax mandates for coming into the country, as I recall, and they definitely had craziness. I mean, but they also have weird other crazy stuff anyway. So they're kind of a country that's used to that. I mean, everybody is crazy in a certain way. Whole countries have crazy stuff, right? Humans are crazy. It happens. But when everybody goes crazy in one direction all at once, that's dangerous, right? Yeah. That's dangerous because then you're just going to go on a rampage of destruction probably. And that's exactly what happened during COVID. So thank goodness people are starting to wake up a little more, and stuff like this is great for that, waking people up, usually one by one. That's what Charles Mackay, the sociologist, said. People go mad in crowds and they wake up only slowly one by one, right?
Yeah.
So we've got many years yet of waking people up, I think.
Do you think COVID's finished? Do you think
it's not finished in terms of the final repercussions and sort of denouement, or the final stages or acts of what it has done to people? Because the fact that we responded the way we did to the COVID phenomenon means that we have done things to ourselves and to our societies that we haven't yet reckoned with. Yep. So in that sense, it's not done, right? The whole drama, the whole play, if you want to put it that way, is not done. So if this were Shakespeare, we'd be about the end of the second act. He's still got another act or two to go, I think. Yeah. But COVID itself, the thing, the virus, the whatever, right? I mean, yeah, I think that's probably a done deal. Like the health effects are not. I mean, they're not even in the top 10 of something I would worry about now, right?
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, if the government wants to do,
if it wants to try to
could we be going lockdowns and all that type of shit again?
I think if people get very scared again about something, then that sort of thing is still plausible, unfortunately. Yes. So the key is to control
It'll need to be something different,
your fear. Yeah, it has to be something different. But I mean, there are a few that have come down the track, Mpox and measles and whatever, right? Measles, we didn't used to have a vaccine, and it was generally not so bad. Certainly, again, by the modern era, by 1950, it was not so bad. It was, if you make a list of the top 10 things you're worried about, measles wasn't on it, right?
Yeah.
So it's not ever that people don't die of anything. We never get to a perfect world, right? The question is, where is the right place to put our health dollars in order to maximize the return in terms of actual health, right? And so then the question is, okay, do we want to lock down the entire country for this one thing, right? Which then we're ignoring all the other things, the strokes, the heart attacks, the cancers, the everything else that needs health assistance, right? Because those things didn't get attended to. I have a gold tooth because of COVID, because I didn't get to the dentist during COVID, right? So thank you very much.
Yep.
So there's these things that just get crowded out. And for all sorts of other reasons to do with psychology and sociology, you have so many other negative effects of that. So you want to work out, where is it best to spend our actual health dollars to get actual health? And you're never going to be able to save everybody. And you're never going to even be able to completely eradicate most pathogens, right? So just get away from that illusion. It's not going to happen. What you can do is focus on health building for the individual, for the community, for the family, for the society as a whole, and positive, optimistic mastery over things. So if somebody tries to scare us again with whatever it is, right? Number one job, tamp down your fear. Right? Do not let yourself get carried away with panic, because when you're in a state of fear, everything else sort of fades in meaning, right? And value. And so you just only focus on the feared object, and then you're very vulnerable. So that's the number one thing I would advise people, just try to stay immune to fear.
Yeah. See, I feel like we should be, as a civilization, like, we should be looking to adapt to new problems.
Yep.
Not try and like run away from them, which seems to be what we're trying to do.
Yep, I totally agree.
With a lot, especially like climate change, especially.
Totally agree. We should be on the front foot.
Yeah,
as they say. Yep.
We should be attacking it.
Front foot.
We should not be running away.
Exactly. So, for example, why are we not pouring money into discovering crops that are, resistant to more flooding, or, more variable conditions, or whatever, or, some other kind of, alternative, I don't know, food distribution system for if bridges get flooded out. I mean, that's also something we can invest in, discovery of new technologies that will help us if and when we get the kind of effects of higher variability in climate that, are being forecast. So fine, we can do that without, wringing our hands and thinking, oh no, the earth is going to end. I mean, what are you going to do? Cower under your bed? Yeah. Really? Is that what all of humanity lived and fought and died for us to all cower under our beds? Are you serious?
Yeah, it seems to be. Seems to be what we seems to be the answer. I don't know.
Well, I don't accept it. I think people are better than that, and people want to be better than that. People have in themselves the capacity to be better than that. Men and women have the capacity to stand up and be strong and fight against that sort of nonsense, and fight for the integrity and the sanity and the happiness in their communities.
But we don't exactly have good role models. If we had a leader who stood up against that type of shit, then maybe more people would. But we've got a leader who,
we got a few.
Every country, not ours. I'm saying everyone.
Sure. In political power, sure, I agree. There are not very many, but you've already been seeing the praises of Elon and Trump. And there are definitely other people in the sciences whom I look up to, right? Peter McCullough, Jay Bhattacharya, they've really stood up. They've tried to make a difference. Yeah. And you don't have to necessarily have a completely perfect hero, but you got to have somebody you think, okay, that was an admirable, courageous thing to do. And that by itself is inspiring. And there are people like that out there. You just have to find them. They're not on your TV screens, generally speaking, right? Yeah. You got to go looking for them, do your own research, right? But you can find them. And if you can't find them in the modern era, find somebody you love from a past era. I've got a photo of Martin Luther King on my bedside table, right? I friggin' loved him, right? I thought he was absolutely standing for the right stuff. And so I'm very inspired by what he did. Yeah. Maybe he got shot earlier than he was corrupted by power, right? So maybe that's why, right? But there are people I really admire, right? Khalil Gibran. I have The Prophet, my favorite book, on the bedside table too. I really admire these guys, and I aspire to be like them, right? Yeah. And you can find that sort of inspiration from human history and open yourself to that. Don't let yourself just be sucked into the TikTok modern craze. There's lots of amazing achievements that people have made. Just allow yourself to be awed and inspired by that. And you will be able to be that in the modern time.
Yeah. Well, Gigi, you are going to be the Prime Minister one day. I'm just going to say it right now, I'm going to start a movement, Gigi Foster for Prime Minister.
Oh God, no, I don't want that. Oh.
Look, you've been amazing. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you in here. I'm so grateful to have you in here. By the way, when you went up to the Blue Mountains, did you like it?
I love the Blue Mountains. It's beautiful.
Beautiful,
it's
right?
So gorgeous.
Yeah, it's so nice.
And a beautiful weekend this weekend as well. Blue sky and just gorgeous.
I dragged my missus out of the house a few weeks ago just to go see the Three Sisters.
Oh
Have you seen the
yeah,
Three
I've
Sisters?
seen them. They're so gorgeous.
We
I
didn't even
know.
go on the walk. I was just like, I just want to go see it. I saw it when I was a
Yeah.
kid, but we got there.
Aw.
And one more thing before we end this, like, I really want Australia to be like, I really want us all to unite and be proud to be Australians. And like, that's what I was thinking about when I was there, because we've got such beautiful landscape. Like, you
Oh,
go see the Blue Mountains, the Three Sisters,
I
like,
know.
it is
It's
beautiful.
breathtaking.
It's breathtaking. And this is on our doorstep.
I know.
And it's like, we could go to America and look at the Grand Canyon and be like, wow.
I have.
It's amazing. Yeah,
You're right. I mean,
it's
because I'm a
amazing.
dual citizen, so
We're
yeah,
going
it's
to
unbelievable.
Vegas in February.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
right. Okay. Well, don't bring too much money.
No. Well, you watch NRL?
Yeah. Okay.
The
So
doggies, the
okay.
doggies. Let's go. So yeah, we're going to Vegas. We're gonna
Very
go
good.
see not the Grand Canyon. It's a bit too far. We're gonna
Okay.
go to what's it, Red Rock Canyon or something?
Okay. Yeah.
Something in
Very good.
Vegas. But yeah, my original point was like, we go to America and we're in awe of something like the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
And why don't we look at our own country through the same kind
Well,
of
I do.
glasses?
I do
you know
as a
what I mean?
Yankee, right? I mean,
Yeah.
because my parents showed me my country when I was 14. They took me across the country and back, and exactly to stoke that kind of pride and awe. And
Yeah.
I think we have so much here. I
Oh,
mean,
it's beautiful. I
the
love this
middle of the
country.
country, the coastlines,
It's
the
so nice.
rainforest,
Yep.
Tassie. I mean, it's unbelievable.
It's
People
so
gotta,
good.
they gotta respect that and just
Yep.
allow themselves to be awed by it.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, Gigi Foster, absolute pleasure to have you in here. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you very much, Gigi.
Thanks so much,
Been an
Jack.
honor. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure to speak with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you very much.